because I clench my jaws or my jaw at night. So
This is going to be sounding terrible on out of context here on this podcast.
This is being recorded right now, by the way.
Yeah. Howdy, everyone.
hi.
Hello.
Especially if you don't ask what's currently being talked about, you'd rather not know.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of biting, welcome to our Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil 0 episodic discussion. I'm really surprised we never talked about these games. I remember Ren was mentioning like, yeah, we never talked about them. I was like, you know, in all the time we've done Resident Evil content, we never talked about these two games. So we're changing that today. You all know me as Biodevil Dom, Biodevil_Dom, but I'm joined by a plethora of guests, so why don't we start off with Renegade Operative. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey people, how's it going on? And I look forward to talking about zombies and Rebecca being bitten on this podcast.
Yeah, oh my god, we gotta talk about the fucking stupid grind mechanics in Zero. That's gonna be something.
Or the cannon bite that she received from the Eliminator in the cutscene and she doesn't get infected.
Body armor.
Plot armor.
Body
Anyway,
armor.
next person, go ahead and introduce yourself, Black Shadow.
Yeah, howdy everyone. It is the Black Shadow here. Yeah, looking forward to discussing what I think was at the time, it probably still is today, one of the strongest entries of its series and a great example of rehashing its genre, and Resident Evil Remake.
Yeah. After that, we got AK Austin. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yo, it's me, AK Austin, you know, in the hood. No, never mind. Glad to be here back again. Yeah, Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 0 was probably the very first games I've ever played as a child. Bad example, but I'm glad to be here, and we're going to be delving into some topics, we should say, but carry on.
Alrighty, and then we have Divik. I hope I said that name right.
Yeah, that's correct. I am here because I'll be the only person defending Resident Evil 0. So I think
actually,
that's
you will not be.
Oh, okay, that's a good surprise.
I just gave it a ringing endorsement, to be fair.
I have issues with RE0, but I do like that game, and I'll explain why later. But anyway, last but not least, we have Sir Brandel. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I don't feel like it.
Damn, he just said fuck y'all.
All right.
And then we do have one other guest coming in, Queen Chicken. They'll be introducing themselves momentarily as soon as they join.
What a name.
But with that being all said, let's start off with question number 1 for Resident Evil Remake. How did you formally find out about the Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 0? Talk about your humble beginnings with both titles. So I personally did not even know that these games existed until I started looking more into playing Resident Evil games, because I started off with 5, but I kind of went backwards and I played 4 like the first time as a game that I played through in the series. It was a different experience, obviously, from most of the other REs. But I wanted to know more about this series. I wanted to really get into it, so I started looking into playing the original 3 games. And that's kind of slowly how I discovered Resident Evil Remake. And before the HD remaster and the Origins collection that we now have, I found out that it was only on GameCube, and I was like, damn, that really sucks, because I don't have a GameCube, but I'd kill to play it. Eventually, I did end up buying a copy and playing it on a GameCube. Oddly enough, I played it on my brother's GameCube before I bought my own and then sold it, because there was only like 2 games I ever wanted to play on it. But more or less, I kind of just found out about it just from my own digging around for this series and trying to discover what games to play next after RE4. Who wants to go next?
I think I could go next. To be quite honest though, I don't even know how I discovered these games, because I know I discovered Remake 1 before 0, but this is way before the like the remasters and the Origin Collection came out. I would say that I saw the opinions of 0 way back in the day. Quite surprised. I was quite surprised people were that divisive for a Resident Evil game. But for Remake though, I couldn't play it because it was only on GameCube, which is probably why a lot of people didn't know this game existed, because they were stuck on one platform that has a very little market share on.
Before you continue, I just want to add to that point specifically. When RE Remake HD came out, not many people knew that it was actually an original game being remastered. People thought that it was legitimately Capcom trying to do fixed camera angles for the first time. And I think that game was coming out in 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Around there.
So somewhere around that time. So
Yeah.
so a lot of people thought that it was a new game, and they didn't realize that it was actually just a remaster of a remake they did way back when in 2002 for the GameCube.
Yeah.
And that was even more so the case with RE0. Even less people knew about RE0's existence compared to Remake's existence as a game.
Probably speaks to the fact that neither game sadly sold all that well, which is kind of a crime, especially if you think about Resident Evil Remake. Really,
with both the GameCube and the Wii version, like, it sold over 1 million, but it took years for that even to happen. In contrast to the ones we already know and love, that took less time to sell that many numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't sell right the Wii until like 2008, 2009, I think it was, which
something
is
like that.
Time.
Yeah, and you got to remember too that part of the reason why those games even were on GameCube and were on the Wii was because specifically the GameCube though was the fact that Shinji Mikami was like so adamant about having those games on PlayStation. And a lot of people, including myself personally, believe that that as far as both Remake and Zero, had it been a PlayStation 2 exclusive or at least been a multi-plat game, that RE wouldn't have gone in the more action orientated direction that it went into after 4.
Yeah, sure, but it's also debatable considering how much more is sold on PS2. But again, we can't talk past this. But yeah, that's all I gotta say on this thing. I don't know when and where I found out about this game. I just know that they existed, and I played them when they came out. Well, mostly Remake, but yes, on PC. So next question, go.
I think I'll chime in then. Like I said as in my intro, I pretty much grew up with Resident Evil Remake and RE0. It was like one of the very first games I've ever played, ever since I can remember. Reason being is that my dad got the GameCube because of Metal Gear Twin Snakes and Resident Evil 4. He was a big Resident Evil fan. And so I was able to have the opportunity to play the GameCube before most people in my family who like video games even knew. So I have like a deep fear that it grew from Resident Evil Remake, either due from certain sections in the game that we'll talk about later in the podcast. But it's basically my childhood has been Resident Evil Remake 0 and 4, and then 3 and 2 in the years. Like I grew up with those games, so it's a big discussion topic for Remake and 0 for me at this moment. But without dragging on, I very much respect both titles, but we'll get into those later on. The next person can go.
I guess I can go next. Mine is really quick. So I got into these games initially because my brother had them both. He had the Remake and he had RE0, and plus he had a GameCube, so it was very easy for me to get access and play those games. From what I seen of them and from what I played, I did thoroughly enjoy the first Remake. I thought it was incredible even for its time. Fantastic graphics, fantastic gameplay, just all around good stuff. For 0, it's a little bit more divisive with me because of some of the gameplay mechanics, which I will illustrate later. But overall, I mean, there is things I like about the game that I'll talk about. And I think it was a great experience for them to go back and remaster it after realizing we fucked up and we made this mistake and we decided to say this didn't sell well, so now we're gonna throw people a bone who didn't play it. That was a really good idea, and I'm glad that they made the HD Origins collection so people could get their hands on it. Because that was like, I just wish that we talked about it when it first came out, but different time, different cast. So yeah, it was fun and enjoyable, and I'm glad to finally have these games again in HD. Anyone else want to go?
Yeah, I was in the end of high school when these came out. I was working at a you guys know what a Hollywood Video is? I know those don't exist anymore.
I do, yeah.
My
You
child.
know what
Dead,
Xbox is?
Hollywood Video used to have something called Game Crazy, and I worked at one of those, and we had stations that had consoles in them, and I couldn't afford a GameCube at the time. I was a high school kid, but we had a GameCube station. So anytime there weren't customers in the store, I would throw in the Resident Evil disc, and I actually beat the whole thing at work over the course of like a couple weeks. And the same thing with RE0. And then when I could finally afford a GameCube, I actually grabbed them, and then they came on Steam. I grabbed them again. But yeah, I used to, instead of working, I would play those like constantly. And that's
All right.
yeah, that's how I got exposed to those.
That's pretty interesting, honestly.
Also, our final guest is here, Queen Chicken. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself really quick.
Hooray.
Hello, I'm Queen Chicken. I'm a streamer at Warden Shepherd. You guys can find me on Twitter at QueenChicken7.
Alrighty, and did you want to go ahead and talk about how you formally found out about Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 0 while you're here?
Oh well, I found out. Well, I was a late bloomer of the Resident Evil series because my first Resident Evil game was 6.
Yeah.
Hell of a start.
Hell of a start it was. It was directed by Michael Bay and everything. Man, very explosives everywhere. Definitely not like the originals, but I heard about the originals. I really wanted to start and see where this all started, and so I played the first remake, Resident Evil Remake, on Steam. Very clunky, and I was like, these controls are wild, but it was. I enjoyed it, and so I played 0 as well, and that's how I started, was playing one of the older or newer games to now.
All right.
Nice. Did everybody go or?
Shadow's next.
The only one was me.
Okay, cool.
But it's fine because the answer is I don't remember. Been too
Oh,
long.
wow.
I have
Wow.
no idea.
I was
what it is.
anticipating for you to explain, because I'm
I
very
don't
interested.
remember how I came across these games. I've been in this series. I've been in the weeds for it feels like about a century at this point.
Yeah.
So I've played both of them so extensively you can't even believe it. But like when I first came across them, shrug. Sorry, kids.
I was gonna say, like, your entire channel started from Resident Evil, so I was really hoping how you would get into these games, but oh well.
I think I learned about Remake probably from the channel because I never had the GameCube. It was not a console I ever had, and I think I was aware of it, but I never touched into the channel. Same for 0. And yeah, when they did the HD remasters, I was like, this is fantastic because both games, one probably more than the other, are pretty strong. And I was fantastic that they had got the HD remasters, and yes, at times people were like, "Oh, it's a brand new game." I'm like, it really isn't, kids, but still a very, very strong title. So, but yeah, when I first came across them, I don't know, it could have been Carrier Pigeon, it could have been like SOS, could have been anything.
All right.
Smoke signals.
Entirely possible. I'm that old.
Are you sure it wasn't like secret government files that you received in order to understand how these games work? And
No comment.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, are we good, or did one other person need to go on this one?
No, I
That's
think
the
we're good. I
That's the
think
lot.
we're good to
Alright,
get to episode, not episode 2, to part 2 of the questions.
Alrighty, so Ren, do you want to read off number 2?
Hold on a second. Yeah. So Resident Evil Remake is known for updating the original game with a vast majority of new content. What was your favorite addition to this package over the original? Examples include connective lore, defense items, Crimson Head zombies, Lisa Trevor redone scenes, the game being 70% different from the original, etc.
I would. This game was kind of in a strange spot, as a lot of games I think do when you try and remake something. That's been out. This game came out, what was like 6 years, I think it was, after the original one came out. Which is kind of like long enough to forget a bit about how the original's gone, but it's too close that you can't just completely rewrite the script. I think Shinji probably deserves, and the whole team, to be fair, I think deserve a lot of credit for what they did with Remake. For people that had played the original, there was, obviously plenty to familiarize and recognize. Everything had a fantastic facelift. Gameplay felt much stronger than it did previously, which was obviously very experimental. Tons of stuff thrown in. The whole Lisa Trevor arc. The horrendous Crimson Heads. The reworking how fights and bosses and puzzles and all sorts of stuff. I think it was very, very admirable how much they did. As far as a favorite though, I don't know. I was always fascinated with the Lisa Trevor, the whole Trevor family line, and how it kind of was integrated into the game. It's like a really terrible backstory of just use and abuse and everything that was done to Lisa. And obviously had George as well, and just completely just getting experimented on and just showing, I think, one of the darkest sides of Umbrella I've series ever showed off.
I was about to say, yeah, that was probably the darkest by that time. Now I think there's some moments in RE lore and history that's a bit darker.
Yeah, and it's tough to do that, when you've got an established plot, and you've got established characters and how they fill in, and when in a way, for people who have played the game, all the twists are spilled. You already know what happens with Wesker, and obviously depending on which way you go, that either Barry's getting manipulated because of his family, or Rebecca has like the most greatest piece of body armor you ever saw, that she can survive a freaking point blank shot. She's like, I'm fine. So to try and keep that refreshed with changing the map around a little bit, little tweaks here and there, you can definitely do that. But like introducing a whole brand new piece of plot on the side and a completely its own side story, and kind of introducing that and integrating it is a very, very difficult task. But I think they did a fantastic job with it.
I mean, they did the best job, honestly.
Yeah, So I wanted to go on this kind of discussing the changes, because personally, I love the original PlayStation 1 Resident Evil, but I also really love the remake. And I think I kind of talk about this often with comparing this remake to the more recent remakes that we got, in the sense that Resident Evil Remake was such a great game that I feel like a lot of us were spoiled by how good it was when it comes to looking at the more recent remakes, which have made their cuts and changes that don't keep a lot of the same aspects that the original games kept.
You jumping ahead, actually.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Oh, my bad.
We'll get
So but point being is that the greatest thing about the Resident Evil remake is that what it does, and what a lot of remakes should strive to do, is take the original game and just build upon it, and do it in a way where it adds in new things that weren't there originally, but those new things can also build a bridge leading towards some of the later aspects of the series, or expanding on the universe even more so, like with the Lisa Trevor stuff, or having Crimson Heads, and going above and beyond by adding in new puzzles that have more of an emphasis on what this series is about, and what contextual lore there is, I think. So that's personally why I really like the Resident Evil remake in particular.
Mm.
Yeah, I in touching on that same point that you said, it is kind of like it's kind of a good rule of thumb with remakes, right? When you look at kind of any remakes out there, is you take your original concept and you kind of expand upon it a little bit while keeping things familiar. I mean, Resident Evil 1 Remake is one of those games that I hold in really high regard, especially compared to some of the other Resident Evil titles that are more recent. I mean, even just changing up some of the camera angles when you're walking into a familiar hallway, or there's a section in the beginning where you're walking in dog hallway and the glass cracks, but nothing happens the first time, a couple times you go through it, and like just messing with your expectations slightly for someone that's been through, director's cut like 7, 8, 9 times, coming to Resident Evil Remake and playing that, like actually kept me on my toes. It wasn't just a straight translation, Crimson Heads that were a nightmare to deal with the first time. I think I screamed in the store, actually. Any of that stuff, the Lisa Trevor stuff, the Neptune encounter, like all that stuff is just like, it's just different enough to keep you on your toes and surprise you, but it still feels like that comfortable blanket that so I don't know. That's
and what it's also tasked to try and do is it appeal to those that have played the game before but not give it away, keeps it fresh. But you also then don't want at the same time start trying to alienate people who have never played any of the games before and feel like they're missing out on something. And again, something like the dog hallway, for example, that little crack, for example, people who played the game before, we can appreciate that because it's kind of a cute little nod to the previous. That's like, okay, things will be a little different. But it's, if you don't play the game before, you're just like, okay, that's not fun. This is going to be a problem later on. It doesn't spoil even cat.
That's one thing I really like about it. They really subvert a lot of expectations with the original game, considering the fact that they try to change things around to mess with you. First, you think the dog's going to come to the window, then it doesn't. Or then you think the dog's going to have the same cutscene in the main hallway where you just stuff his head back outside, and then all of a sudden he comes in and he becomes an enemy in the main hall. It's stuff like that that's really like unique that they changed around. That's really cool as well because you really don't expect it.
Yeah.
Can I ask your opinion on something? Like all of you on this. So I've played the original RE1 like plenty of times as well as the remake, and I actually really like the differences between some of the rooms. Like I like how the rooms were designed in the original like PlayStation 1 classic, but I also really like how the remake either completely does away with those original rooms and recreates them from the ground up, or adds on to those rooms with like additional hallways and new rooms that weren't there before. Like how did you guys feel about that?
I agree because the library was boring in the original, so they decided to make it a boss fight, which was a lot more entertaining.
Yeah.
It's also a good boss fight too.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing.
I like Zero.
Nothing feels out of place when you think of like the extra stuff and like kind of like making the map. It's a little bit more complicated, sure, but nothing feels like egregious. Nothing feels like it's just thrown in for the hell of it. It feels like everything kind of has its purpose. If you've got like you've got the balcony outside with the dog whistle. Again, the library talked about there with that. Even just like thinking about the whole outside section, where you've got 2 directions you can go now when you go into the courtyard, and obviously that dives into Lisa Trevor stuff. But even that, it's completely brand new, but it doesn't feel like it's just thrown in for the sake of you have to put in something new. It feels like it's got its place, it's earned, and then it even ties in with like the crest, the whole Star Crest puzzle, which they've reworked for the purposes of getting the Magnum, that sort of thing. So
it feels like, kind of going off of that point that you just made, like it feels like what they did was like, how can we make each area feel more meaningful in this remake, because we've created some of the more recognizable rooms that people know, and maybe this time with the remake we have more time to work on some of these other rooms that we didn't have the time originally to work on. So I think that's what really makes it kind of stand out. I do have a very, very slight hot take. I actually kind of miss the room where there's a room in the original where it's located right next to the library. It leads to this like room where you can get, I think you get the battery, and you could see like.
I know what you're talking about.
The crow
The crow jump scare
like, burst through the window.
That's so cool. I missed that
room. Other than that, I mean, I get why people don't really like the library, but I kind of like that library. I feel like they could have like had two different ones, like had that as a completely separate room, or make that a new like puzzle room instead. So I don't know. I kind of dig. I dig both. I think both look great. So like,
Yeah.
I don't think you could really go wrong with either or.
I was
think-
thinking maybe that they could have taken the crow jump scare and just moved it to someplace else. Like it's the room with the artist panels that you have to light up. They changed that puzzle, by the way. They could have made the crows like burst through there, because originally I think you have to walk through anyway in order to not trigger them in the first place.
Well, you know what would have been great is if they had the because obviously there's going to be like camera angles you can't really get a good view of, right? Or like parts of the room that you can't get a good view of. They could have had a shot where it was like pointing from the ceiling and the crows like burst through the ceiling or something like that.
That would have been cool.
The only
Ah,
thing
man.
that they should have left in the game from the very original files wise and all that, or from the director's cut rather, is the basement music, and they just don't say a word about it.
Oh,
in
fuck.
interviews or anything. Just leave the basement music in there
So,
and just don't even react, don't even acknowledge it.
so the funny thing about that is, so hypothetically speaking, had they recreated that soundtrack, I've seen some videos people posted where they've recreated some of those tracks from director's cut and made them actually really good. Which I have a bit of a hot take on that too. I actually do really like the director's cut soundtrack. Minus
Some of it's
the
not
basement
bad.
theme.
Some of
Yeah,
it's
there's some really good
Yeah,
tracks that could have worked.
the return revisit. I don't get myself something, but when you revisit the manor, you
Yeah.
know, some of the music of the hunters is really good.
Yeah,
Really-
I think so too. And but that being said, I guess what I'm trying to say with that is like, I think what would have been like the issue would have been though is that because it was composed by a fraud, that's probably, well, at the time they didn't know, right? But like now with that new remaster too, they probably wouldn't have been able to keep it anyway.
Yeah.
So
The only other thing I miss from the original is the fact that the game was a lot more gory. Like Rebecca's death, that was a lot more gruesome in the original than it was in the remake where they cut away, as opposed to her head just comes off like in the original. I'm like, oh shit. So
yeah, 2002 compared to 96 couldn't get
It's-
away with quite as much.
yeah,
It's more comedic too.
yeah, it's true. Maybe that's like a knock at the voice acting as well, because the dialogue in the original was not that great, but still, just I missed the
Not
gore.
that great.
Yeah, well, that's saying it lightly, but you
That's
know
like
what I
the
mean.
Understatement of the century.
You know what I mean.
what are you
But-
talking about? That is some fucking grade A voice acting. That's why they
Hope
modded
this
it
isn't
back into
Chris's
the
blood.
A
PC
for
version.
astronomically.
Hey, those
poor.
voice actors did a great job.
Ah,
I mean,
Exactly.
for the experience they had and probably what they got paid for, they did all right.
Could have been a Jill sandwich.
oh, I also missed the.
Wesker, where
cos-
have you been?
Damn it.
Beans and cods. and-
Alrighty. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ren. What were you trying to say?
I totally forgot because everyone was like bringing up lines from the first one. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I think I was saying that costumes also from the original, like I think there's costumes that didn't make it, but they tried in the remake to compensate by putting in stuff from Code Veronica, Resident Evil 3. So I kind of dug it in a sense, even though they cut out some costumes.
original
And more, and
costumes.
even more in the HD remaster as well, like chucking in like the RE5 costumes as well.
Oh,
so-
yeah, I forgot about that.
The Lost in Nightmares costumes.
Yeah.
My only complaint, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this with like RE0 in particular later in the doc, but my only complaint is that RE0 had more additional costumes than Remake, and I personally would have loved to have seen Capcom throw in like Chris and Jill's like Revelations costumes, since Revelations 2 was coming out right around that time as well, and they could have had a way to like promote it slightly in that regard, or like add in some of the costumes from the original PlayStation release, or some of the other ports of RE1.
Mm.
So
So if I can jump in real quick, because we haven't talked about it at all. I want to talk about the Crimson Heads because that was probably my favorite edition in the remake. Reason being is that still to this day, Crimson Heads will always make me want to pee my pants. Their design, their sound design, their design, and their gameplay design is so unique to Resident Evil that it doesn't feel great having it in other games other than Remake, if you can understand what I'm saying. I think Remake is the only Resident Evil could have Crimson Heads be so wellly done and so terrifying at the same time. On my stream, I actually had a moment where I killed a zombie in hard, and I was trying to get to the snake room to activate it so I can get Richard's shotgun because I needed it. And he got up within 10 minutes of me downing him. I did not expect it. I thought I had more time. And when it happened, I completely had to stop for like 5 minutes just to catch my breath. And that just solidifies how much I just love Crimson Heads and Resident Evil remakes, because they're just the most terrifying thing in the entire game, in my opinion. And I want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to this. It's subverting what you expect, and it's also trying to make the players have like establish consequences for your actions. It's not a case of just going around a mansion, just blasting things dead, and that's it. You're fine. It's like you need to, obviously look to find ways, obviously, to deal with it, the lighter and that sort of thing. And you kind of it kind of promotes a bit of backtracking, and there's a bit of busy work going on, which you could take or leave, I guess, as a gameplay mechanic. But yeah, the whole idea that you take these guys down, unless you deal with them properly, they're going to come back even worse. Again, it's just kind of trying to instill that sense of fear and dread into the player.
Yeah, you learn to stack dead bodies on top of each other real quick, or blow their heads off with shotguns. Like, that just becomes second nature at that point. I love Crimson Heads.
Delimbing, I think, also counts too. If you shoot off one of the legs,
yes,
zombie, that
it's basically the same as like a headshot, but you like shoot them like someone that's not the head. It does that, and it does the same thing.
But the head's funnier.
There are certain zombies that will never turn into Crimson Heads in that game.
I think you mean the lab zombies, right? Some of them, at least.
Most of them become.
There's a couple others, I think, as well, who tend not to.
The graveyard behind the painting.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple of loose locations, yeah, but pretty much everywhere, like in the map.
Zombies without clothes don't turn into Crimson Heads. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Load-bearing clothes.
I'm just remembering just their freaking hype, their roars in my head now, and it's just bringing up back.
Honestly,
nightmares.
In my opinion, at first they were terrifying, but once you get the shotgun, they're kind of easy, in my opinion.
Well, once you learn how to deal with them and prevent them from coming, too, like, every time, like, once I realized, hey, like, if I leave this body here, it's gonna turn into a Crimson Head later. Just burn the body and walk away.
Yeah,
it's all about it's all about it's about the person's first experience. It's like it's the key one, especially something like the Crimson Heads, because of the way they work. Because you don't realize how bad they are until you run into them, and then you're like, yeah, this is a real problem. I got to do something about this.
What's funny?
Like, once you know how to headshot anything, like, yeah, obviously it becomes a bit trivial, but you're talking 3, 4, 5 gameplays down the road, and then you're in a different story altogether.
I want to bring something up real quick. What's funny? You don't get that VAC file about burning them until you're in the lab. That's like the last section of the game.
Oh, that's bullshit.
That's true.
Yeah, you get told about like the fact you need to burn them, but you don't actually get specifics on what exactly it is you're fighting until the very end. Yeah, which is a strange choice. You'd expect to have been told a bit more about them a bit sooner than that. For some reason, it is a strange design choice.
I guess Capcom wanted to say, well, I guess you got to figure it out on your own what to do. And honestly, after paying attention, you kind of get it after a while, but you don't get that file until like the last bit. So first time players probably were like, what the fuck is this?
I think it's you could either take it as the developers kind of trusting that you can put 2 and 2 together, or you could also suggest they're just trying to not insult your intelligence, but then some people need that helping hand.
Well, some things are not as obvious as the other. Like,
your
the body is there. Like, what makes you think I could just burn it, because the kerosene could be used for something else. Like, I could burn a couple of bushes, whatever,
Yeah,
Like,
but like when you get that first safe room and you pick up like the whatever the heck it is, and
Flash.
you get the file, it should kind of lead you to assume what you got to do. But yeah, it's an unusual game choice.
All right. Anything else to talk about for this last section?
I think we're good, unless if somebody else wanted to make a quick
no, let's
point
move on.
it. Okay, so Brandon, you want to read off number 3?
Sure. Speaking of BOWs, how did you feel about their effectiveness on gameplay compared to the original? I hate how tanky some enemies can be. Well, zombies in particular with the shotguns because of the
God.
crimson hit mechanic. That's one thing I really hate that Remake has done. I don't like the chance of me actually blowing up a zombie head. It should be guaranteed, you know. If they're gonna come back as a crimson head, at least know if they're gonna do the crimson head mechanic though, at least do it with the zombies that are already dead or just the ones that I naturally didn't kill with a headshot. But if I aim up and blow the heads out though, it should always be guaranteed. I don't like that little particular change at all. But besides that though, the enemies for the most part are generally fine.
Hunters are all throughout because they are kind of unfair in the original. They are
Yeah.
very happy to just chain hit you to death, which is
Lake swipe.
never a good game mechanic.
Oh, the same problem that happens with the Eliminators in Zero. They like to chain swap.
Yeah, exactly, and it never goes down well. So
We'll
at least
get to
they've
that.
reworked a bit. They're still very, very dangerous. And you even got obviously bits and pieces that there's a couple of rooms where they can like bust doors down later on, which is kind of a cool way of kind of like again changing the map a little bit, and it makes everything feel a little bit more diverse. I think it's a very, very nice touch. Even obviously the movement of zombies throughout rooms also is kind of a cute, but I feel that the Hunters is a lot more. It means a lot more.
It just also shows their brute force and just hunting instincts against the player, which is really, really cool. Especially
it's cute,
for its time.
It's cute but discreet world building.
I feel like they were way worse in the original. Like
In the
are.
original, they are brutal to fight. Just super date, and they'll just insta kill you like out of nowhere, and they don't even. It's just so sudden, and there's sometimes just nothing you can do about it. Super bad times.
I believe
The
there's
decapitation deaths were cool though. You gotta admit that at the very least.
Yeah.
They were, but they eventually just
fuck
got
things.
annoying. They got so annoying over time. I think the worst area with these enemies in the original was the basement.
Actually, I think with director's cut on the arranged mode, they were worse.
Yeah, because there's
The
like 3 of
difficulty is
them.
ramped up, and there's like if you're playing as either Chris or Jill, I felt like it was worse with Chris, and I still to this day have not beaten arranged mode with Chris on director's cut, but they put like 3 or 4 like in the same room, and
Yeah,
you're like,
there's a couple of hallways which is just absolute death traps, but you've got to cross them.
yeah, and it sucks too because like if you're out of health items, they guard basically like 3 or 4 green herbs there, and it's like why?
Yeah,
Far up.
the hallway to where the plant room is the one that comes to mind. Absolute death trap.
Yeah, I will say though, in terms of just looking at the enemy designs, and I mean, obviously it's really no contest. Like, yeah, the GameCube made the enemies look more terrifying, more realistic for the time. I genuinely like a lot of the zombies that they made in the remake. I feel like they were definitely far more appropriate for what they were trying to create, because we've seen like a lot of the CG cutscenes that they would throw into these games, these pre-rendered cutscenes, and they never really looked or translated well into gameplay in terms of just how they looked. So I feel like Remake really nailed the look, both for the cutscenes and the actual gameplay, where they just looked all across the board like what the developers intended for them to look.
Yep, Plant 42, I think, is the prime example.
Yeah, Plant
Yeah.
42.
To mention the sound design of all the creatures is like perfect for them.
Oh, okay. So, like the Crimson Heads, for example, I'm glad you brought that up. Like the fact that you can hear them running down the fucking hall ready to square up, like that is just so fucking terrifying.
Yeah, I hate that noise.
Oh. Yeah, walk in a room and there's a crimson head, and you're like, nope.
The amount of times I've turned around instantly just to leave the room, just to reset them, like, nope.
Mm-hmm. The
What
worst.
do you make of
it's
I think they can get overlooked a bit, but the whole how Lisa Trevor's handled in combat, the fact obviously that she's like invincible basically, and almost everyone always sunk a ton of ammo into her into the cabin and was like, why is this not working?
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because they effectively added in a pursuer type enemy in Resident Evil 1 thanks to the remake. So technically every each game of the original trilogy has a pursuer now of some kind.
Yeah, then Mr. X, Demi, and now Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
I also like from a story perspective, she made sense because she was the original carrier for like the G virus and also the Nemesis prototype. They essentially workshopped that in to make it make sense from a plot perspective, and I really that was awesome. That's one of the things I really liked about that creature, because you could see Birkin's eyeball right on her back too when she's walking, and that's kind of cool.
There is a lot going on, I think is the best way to describe this.
Yes.
In more ways than one.
Yeah.
Hentai tentacles coming out. Her, she had a bunch of faces. She's a hunchback. Like,
Oh my God.
It's
Also, did she
like-
like rip off her mother's face or wanted to and put it on herself or something like that?
No, she ripped off other females' faces.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If she had Facebook, I think the status would be it's complicated.
Okay.
Haha.
There's a reason why Jill is more haunted by Lisa than Chris.
Yeah, I could see that.
Chris Chaffer.
And I always have funny when you're walking through the cabin on the way back. You just walk out the door, and then Lisa just comes just donk on the head. You just
Yeah, I was always wondering, why didn't she kill that person there? I guess like plot cyborg was going on or something.
Have you heard of plot armor, young sir?
Yeah, like
so-
they should have been dead from there, because that was a pretty powerful clunk, you know. Or if anything, she'd been knocked out a lot
There
longer.
has to be at
than
least
we
a
are.
mild concussion,
Mild, I don't know. I think a serious case of brain damage.
or just completely crushing someone's neck and head and spine all in one move. I mean,
No,
honestly,
Let's
I think
fall on
to
the
sleep-
floor and start shaking. Level of head damage there.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd begin to shake. I think it'd just be gone.
And I think she kept her like she needed her tools to get her face off.
Yeah, but alas.
Like, hold on 1 second, I need to get my scalpel.
As far as the BOWs go, always, playing OG Resident Evil as a kid and seeing some of the redesigns was just like part of the most fun. When you see the dogs in that intro cinematic, like the dogs look awesome. The dogs look great. And
Shadow.
especially really big into like Yawn. I remember Yawn, when you first fight Yawn, it looks like one of those wooden toy snakes you would paint as a kid. It
Yeah.
has little like rubber tongue glue on and all that. So seeing like kind of the Yawn fight a little bit mixed up, and then the giant Neptune is like, I don't know, all the like creature BOWs like stick out really, really fresh in my mind. And then
Neptune-
just like adjusting them, like the hunter behavior and all that, just enough. Like it rolls into the last question again, where you have this familiarity, or like the Crimson Heads, you're really familiar, and then there's just something kind of mixed up with it, and it, kind of, that's the overall kind of consensus with Resident Evil Remake, right? Is like the same but different. So I don't know. I always loved the creature designs in one. They stuck out really, really heavily when I played it.
Neptune leaves a decent mark because he like doesn't let up after you drown out the water. You have to electrocute the guy just to finish him off. I thought that was a really like good moment.
It's
Oh,
a cute little
safe.
thing.
It's a cute little thing. Like you're like these sharks. You're in the you go into the water tank for a first playthrough for most people, and you're just like, there's sharks. What? Okay. And then there's a giant shark, and you're like even more panicking. And then you have to do the little puzzle before Neptune breaks the glass. And you're like, okay, haha, I beat these sharks. Well, you get up and to try to get the key item, and Neptune wakes up. On my first playthrough, and as if I can remember, I freaking freaked the hell out when I saw Neptune working, because I have a deep fear of dark ocean, especially if there's sharks. So that really got to me.
I think the greatest part about that segment is when you realize that the music kicks in, because in the original it's like, well, it's these two baby sharks, you kill them or you can run away. It's not a big deal. But in this one, it's like once you start running away and you see the baby sharks and they try to bite your leg, and then you hear that music and you don't know what's going on, and then the big one tries to eat you. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, they turned Neptune into an actual mini boss fight because you don't do the thing in time though. You're just dead. So like, I do like the changes for Neptune.
Yeah, that was pretty
Hey.
fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, it was definitely a good section.
Well, how you guys feel
Um,
about, you know, the tyrant and everything? How they changed that fight just a little bit?
I think the tyrants,
It's
even though it's short,
fun.
it's sweet. It's short but sweet.
I like
my
how he
opinion.
can kill the secondary character if you're not doing anything or paying attention.
The amount of times I've seen Rebecca or Barry just get impaled is great. It's because
Yeah,
you have
it's-
no
it's-
weaponry just to stop him, really.
Yeah, it's fine. I like the way they kind of like try and get like include like your partner to get involved in the end fight, although they are definitely very easy to get killed, but you know, it's fine, I guess. I got no problems with it. It's
I've,
not
uh,
egregious.
I always love the stupid big commando rocket launcher that Jill gets. That's always just like- yeah, that's I mean that fight's just cool, man. Like that slightly updated tyrant design is just neat. And the fight really doesn't change. Yeah, it's like, you know, you're looking out for some AI partners, but it's still basically the same. It's just, I don't know. It's a good way to finish.
Not to mention, if you're playing on hard or something, or the tyrant still has a lot of health, he'll deflect the first rocket, which is hilarious.
I
Oh,
did
it's-
not know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you play on
Yeah.
hard, or if you play on normal and you don't damage him enough and you have the time limit start going down, because it also kind of works the same way. If you deal damage, it reduces a time cooldown. But if you save up a ton of your magnum shots, you can get the rocket launcher right away, you know? On hard, and I think sometimes on normal, if you shoot one rocket, the tyrant will deflect it. It's cool
Yeah.
because you're like you activate the cutscene, like, oh, I did it.
Nope.
The music doesn't the camera angle changes to a slightly different camera angle to show the tyrant deflect the missile. And I think for most people, if I remember watching some people, they were like losing their minds, like, what? And they shot
No.
again and they killed him. You're like,
2
oh, he's-
Remake effectively did the same thing. If you play on hardcore mode, shoot the rocket the first time against the tyrant, he's like, nah, I'm good. Shoot another one,
Like-
and he's dead.
Yeah,
I
it's,
think-
it's a cute idea, but then all you do is you just press the button again, and it's just like, oh, okay. It was a bit of a missed opportunity, I think.
it's just for first playthroughs, and you don't know that's a thing. Is it?
Oh
it's
yeah,
a
but even in the
little
first playthrough,
surprise.
yeah, it's like you're like, oh, that's not good. Oh wait, I've got 3 more, and I'm still
Yeah.
aiming at you. I'll just fire at you again, and
Yeah.
then you're dead. So I think it could have
It's
been
just-
a bit better handled, but that's a nitpick.
Yeah.
The only other thing is defense items, if we didn't talk about those already. I
Oh
think it's
yeah,
fine.
the whole defense item stuff.
You know-
which may or may not have broke the
Mhm.
series going forward, but
Mm-hmm.
I wish more games brought them back though, because I'm glad that 2 had them. But the one thing I wish it 2 didn't do is have it as a common item for you. Because in contrast to Remake 1, though, I like that it's like a separate column for you, so you don't worry about taking up extra inventory
Yeah.
space for defense items. In contrast to Resident Evil 2, where everything's in your same inventory slot. So that's one thing I actually don't like. But you know,
Something I agree on.
Not sure if most of you know this, but if you stick a knife in a zombie's head and blow it off, you can get your knife back.
you can
Yeah,
get
yeah.
it back in
you can't. But you want it back after a while, because at that point, if you're done with a spot, then just leave the knife and move on. You can always get another one potentially.
Yeah, the game vomits self-defense items at you, so you don't have to
Mhm.
scratch.
Especially as
Even I-
Chris,
Yes.
the grenades
Just
are too
needs
useful.
them.
Yeah.
Just needs
Those
the
flash
shit.
grenades are pretty good.
It's kind of risky though with Chris, because if you blow him up near you, you take damage. I noticed that.
You
Yeah,
go
you
into
can take
danger.
damage from the frag.
Go-
From the frag.
Well, I mean, who's stupid enough to stand next to him?
A couple of people have in tight situations.
Yeah, sometimes things happen, you know.
I've knifed a zombie with a grenade in its
Sometimes
mouth.
you're in a really tight
what do you-
hallway.
What are you trying to say, Ren? Are you trying to insinuate that you've done this?
I mean, everybody has face splash damage like once in a while with a grenade.
Uh,
And
At
not
least
from my own
once.
grenade.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
want the zombie to be dead, so I don't want to exit the room. But if it's a tight space, I just run.
Yes. Sure.
People have flashbanged
Doesn't the,
themselves before in
grenade blow
RE2.
up on its own sometimes too, though.
It,
Uh,
it has a fuse.
it
It,
does.
blows
It has
up
a fuse.
eventually on its own, but you can also
Okay.
shoot.
Pretty sure Chris does pull the pin.
Yeah. So mistakes are made. Everyone makes them.
All right. Are we good here on this one then? We can move on to 4.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
which
we're
is
good.
which is the funny one that we referenced earlier.
Alrighty,
yes.
Divik, you want to read on number 4?
Yeah, the original Resident Evil was known for some very laughable dialogue. Give your take on how the remake handled the script / characters, and before anyone else says it, don't open that door.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
To be
Okay.
to be fair,
wait, hold-
like
hold- hold-
no. I need to. I gotta start here. That I
Please do.
think the Capcom were kind of in a bit of an impossible situation with this because obviously with how infamous the original voice casting was, how do you go about trying to revoice this game? Because you can't even begin to try to do the same as you did previously.
You can't
whether you
skip its
want to or
legacy.
not.
Let's be
Impossible.
honest here.
Yeah.
You can't skip his legacy because the reason why people mod it because it's funny as shit.
Yes.
But
I mean,
but never mind that for a second. Hold on. Like I just want to say this though.
Mhm.
To be quite frank though, while yes, the delivery of the lines were corny and funny as shit though. I'll be quite honest though. They try a little too hard to abridge them in the remake. It comes off like they're trying really hard to like, okay, this is what they actually meant or something like that. Which I'm like, I'd rather take the original line, just have a different delivery versus just changing it up just for the sake of changing it up. Because I feel like they're just trying a little extra just to separate itself from the original.
I think you
I think-
really
I
get
think what
that.
it-
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think part of why it was done that way originally is because, well, for one, at the time, nobody really took voice acting for video games seriously. It was a new era for games at that point. So like voice acting was just like it wasn't really commonplace at that point. Whereas like now it's like we almost have it like everywhere. Most games these days have voice acting. So when we hear voice acting that's on this kind of scale of, bad, because it, at least, it's so bad it's good in this case, but
Mhm.
a lot of people tend to criticize that because we've gotten past that point of having really bad voice acting. But I think another issue is that with that original cast, this is a Japanese developed game, so when they heard this, they probably thought, this sounds fucking great. We don't understand a single word of this, but let's throw it in anyway because why not? So
And
yes,
to
the
add on,
Japanese
what I think.
version still had the American voices, but it was
Yeah,
subtitled,
yeah.
wasn't it?
it
Yeah.
wasn't until recently, and there's a specific reason as to why, but it wasn't until recently they started dubbing a lot of their English only series. So Devil May Cry was also in that kind of same situation where there was only English, no Japanese until fairly recently, and now with Resident Evil, they've been more and more adding in Japanese voice acting and dialogue, and specifically before this kind of like push to add in more Japanese voice acting and dialogue became a thing. For Resident Evil in particular, Shinji Mikami just wanted the characters to, sound American or sound like where they were from. So because the characters were American, he just wanted English voice acting to make it feel more authentic than to say have Japanese voice actors acting as American characters, because it wouldn't have made sense. This
Well-
is kind of a similar thing that was done in the case of like Devil May Cry, where characters were only voiced by American speaking actors, or English speaking actors, I should say.
And more on that point, like you were saying, I think even that "Don't Open That Door" line is, I think that's 3 or 4 different lines actually put together, spliced to make that line. And it's like you said, it was a lot of guys who didn't speak English going like, "Oh, that sounds cool. Let's cut that together. Or let's do that."
Yeah,
And just putting it in the game, which I think, regardless of whether you're a talented voice actor or not, if you lack the direction, you're still going to kind of get the like weird result out of it.
yeah. I think that was also like you know, so like we had Paul Haddad for Leon at one point, right? And he went on to go do a voice in Daymare 1998. But that was a game that was being developed by Italian developers, an indie Italian development studio. So even in that case, right, even though he's like the best voice in that game, you could still tell that there was a lack of direction in some areas where the voice acting just kind of sounds a little bit off, or sounds like the person understood English enough, but not enough to make it sound like an actual like English conversation or an English
Yeah.
sentence.
I got another example to add to that. Marvel's Capcom Infinite, actually, the most recent one I could think of. Ruben himself, for example, who was his Dante. A lot of people question is that's the same actor as Dante, because he sounded different, and considering the nature of the game's product, they didn't do a fine job at directing, or they didn't have enough time to like give new lines or different takes, etc., etc. So like at the end of the day though, like the actors can be good though, but the people that control your voice practically, can screw it up.
There's also like a prime example in this game where you play as Chris and go to the piano, and Rebecca starts playing it, and then he says that line. Oh, what was that? I couldn't stop laughing. That was funny.
There are still some pretty bad lines in the remake. There's some
sure. Yes.
Isn't there one where
You're pitiful.
Yes.
Oh no, that's the
one
original.
where he's like, Rebecca, is that you? Like,
Yeah, like right in front of her.
You can see her, like.
Rebecca as well. But look at those monsters.
I love the what was it? I love Barry's lines though the most. Like,
I sympathize for Barry's voice actor. How talk about an impossible situation. You got all these crazy lines that your predecessor has spoken, and you have to like reference them, but you can't say them, but you want to.
I don't know.
Poor guy.
Regardless of what iteration of Barry they do, like I always feel like they do that character justice because they know people love that character so much. I just wish he was in more fucking games.
Yeah, I mean, he's the world's best dad.
He really is. Like, how can you not like a guy who goes like, "Don't worry, I have this."
Revelations 2 actually references the original, but not the remake version of the lines. So it makes you wonder, like, which lines is more canon than the other.
I also really like the one where in the original he's like, it's best that you, the master of unlocking, have this. It's just the lockpick or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then they reference that again in Revelations 2, where he's like, "Who's the master of unlocking now?"
It's not the same.
He mentions the sandwich line too in Revelations 2 as well.
Claire does. She's like, I could have been a Claire sandwich, and Morio's like, God, does Barry always tell that fucking story to everybody?
It's not the same. It's not the same. It's like the line they replaced it with, especially the sandwich line, is like, oh, well, you could have fit perfectly into a sandwich. It's not. It's like the cheesy side of me loves that a lot more in the original than it is in the remake, but I understand why they changed it to be a bit more serious, because they were in that situation, like Shadow said, where it's like, how can you follow up on something that's universally loved with the idea that you're going to make it sound, or at least try to make it sound a little bit more natural in the process, and it just doesn't work in some areas.
I have a side question, because Capcom has kind of toyed with the idea of potentially doing a remake again for Resident Evil 1, and obviously that means that we're going to have another set of new voice actors, new lines, redone lines. Do you think that they should go for a more campy tone, or continue on a more serious tone that's more in line with the recent Resident Evil games?
It's going to be surely like the more recent ones. They're going to just totally redo pretty much all the scripts. There might be a little cute references, but I imagine it'll be completely reapproached from brand new and made to be fairly serious, I would imagine. I can't see them redoing it nowadays, 2021, 2022, or whatever, and going for like crazy sandwich lines. I just don't see how they would do that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. Like, Capcom's going back to a more serious, but also survival horror type route, so they're going to stick with more serious tone if they're gonna remake this game.
I mean,
because
Resident Evil
dialogue.
8 reference 5 with the bouldering, punching asshole.
Oh.
That's for
Yes.
because of the I think the American side of things, because I'm pretty sure that dialogue is not in the Japanese version.
Is
Oh,
it now?
Yeah, I could be wrong on that though, but I don't remember seeing that in the Japanese version. So
They probably don't appreciate the style of humor as much as the Western
Which is
counterpart.
weird because Japan is widely known for having like dark and cheesy humor.
Well, that's true. They do change lines or translations on like a daily basis. Like if you look at the Resident Evil files themselves, a lot of them are definitely vastly different compared to the American interpretations.
that's just in German too, because like going to another company, Sega's games back in when they had manuals, like even the American side of things botchers the true translation of certain things to
Yeah.
the point where it's lost in translation.
Yeah, so you
That's
gotta
the-
like definitely look at those files like deep if you want to get some of the context or true meaning behind it, because some of those have actually bled into lore being misinterpreted. And I think a guy who talks about it a lot is Wesker's Report. He mentioned that a lot on Twitter. Like he says some of these files are definitely not the same as they were in the American versions.
Yeah,
I love this idea that you've got this that the translations are changed on a daily basis. So today it's a sandwich, tomorrow it's like a bread roll, next week it's like a bowl of cereal.
That could happen.
Folger cereal. I love it.
Almost for a bowl of cereal.
Next year, burger.
I do wish Remake had an intro sequence like OG Resident Evil where it does a little cast roll. That was just the stupidest and the
Which
best.
one? Because there's
Multiple. There's ones where Chris smoking. I know there's a
Yeah,
yeah. Well, no.
Yes.
But I was asking, when I'm asking that, I mean more so the American version has a different song compared to the Japanese version.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
there are two different themes. Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, so there's two different themes, and I think there's also a different ending theme for the original Japanese release for RE1 or on PS1 at least.
I think
Granted, they
for
didn't-
yeah. I think for simplicity he means the original like
Yeah.
American version.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Hmm.
the cast roll is just so stupid and great. Like it's the
Yeah.
best.
It's so
Wesker
B-movie.
channeling Johnny Bravo. It's just great.
Yeah. All the B movie. That's what RE1 originally is. It's a B movie brought
Yeah.
to life in a video game. Have fun.
Yeah, it's just they tried to make it once again creepy. I get the sentiment because in the remake it was the zombie rising out of the body bag and then it gets shot.
Which is really funny because you've got Remake 0 and then you've got 4 just a couple years later where Leon's saying terrible one-liners every couple minutes. It's just the tonal shift. The
Sadler,
best.
your small time.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Don't fucking start
He thinks
playing
his
right
brain
hand
is
comes
rising.
Your right hand comes off.
I mean, that was actually a good line.
Your right hand comes off.
I honestly did not get that line at first until I really thought about it and I was like, oh, well, he's mocking him and he's also talking about the other Verdugo.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Big cheese.
I don't know, like I think like with another remake of RE1, right? I could see them maybe adding in new dialogue that, you know, the community might turn into memes or something like that, you know, or
Yeah.
might have a good laugh with, but also try to have a more serious tone that maybe even the original RE remake didn't have. So
It will have its moments. Like it has to have its moments. It's the social media world at the moment. It's like if it didn't have those moments, it'd almost be out of place nowadays.
I think the great thing about, like, you know, a potential second remake of RE1 would be that, you know, we already have so many different ports of the original RE1 and a couple of different ports for the HD remaster. And I think the great thing about having another remake would mean that there's just so many other ways of playing RE1 that there's really no wrong way of going about it.
There's something else on the on this question I wanted to bring up because I haven't heard about it yet. But in the original game, you guys remember towards the end, Wesker and when Chris and finds Wesker finally at the end, and Wesker's revealing his evil plot,
And he's like,
he starts clowning. He just starts laughing at him.
Stop
So,
it.
like, how do you guys feel about how they changed that in the new remake?
If
Um,
I am well aware, there's different scenes depending on the character you go in with. Like, if you go by yourself and Rebecca's dead and stuff like that, then that scene is different.
Yes.
I
In
think
both games, yeah.
Yeah, I think Wesker in the remake just beats the living hell out of Chris and he pins him to the ground, which it goes to show that Wesker is not to be reckoned with, even without powers. And then the other one is just him holding Chris at gunpoint, and then I think he shoots Rebecca, same as the original, of course. So I was fine with the changes. I didn't mind them at all. Just it was funnier in the original because he made him look super pitiful.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm totally okay with the headcanon that Chris's childish laughing at Wesker, sets off like 15 years of internal hatred. I got no problems with this.
I think he kind of does it as well in the remake where he says, Wesker, you become senile. They just changed the line.
Yeah.
much.
Because Wesker.
You become senile.
Yeah, because Wesker basically is going off about the tyrant, and then Chris is like laughing about it.
Life
Yeah, he's
form.
He's like, this is the ultimate life form, and you're laughing.
It is like the birth of LOL, isn't it? Surely it's like way before its time. I never thought about this.
It's just like, stop it. Why are you laughing? Stop it.
So, hope Veronica rebooted Wesker for the better because he was just a clown. In fact, he
Oh, yeah,
killed off by a freaking tick and in Jill's side of the story.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. The tick kills him in the original. Cuts his head
Can do,
off.
yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I should take
Chimera.
Chimera. Sorry, got it the wrong book confused.
In the books.
Damn it, you beat me to it. I was gonna post that.
Oh,
Oh, damn it.
Look at Discord.
But yeah,
Laughing. It's
Actually-
ultimate life form. And you are laughing?
yeah, actually,
can that be the thumbnail?
that should be
Yes,
the thumbnail.
yes.
Oh my god, dude. That'd be funny as shit.
I'm thinking like, yeah, I think that would be really interesting to see how that would also change in a remake with like those scenes of like Wesker talking about the ultimate life form, because I feel like they could make like Chris laughing again, and make that still make that somewhat serious, but make it a thing of like Chris just obviously like bluffing about potentially having an ego about like he could take this shit on, right? Because he might actually be scared, but to kind of cover it up and bluff about it, he laughs.
It's less a mocking laugh and more kind of like laughing because of like how ridiculous the situation you're almost in.
Yeah.
It's almost like
and-
that
and-
disbelief laugh.
And I could see that more as like in regardless of which version we talk about, I feel like Wesker would interpret that as like, oh, he's just being an egotistical dick and he's not taking this seriously at all.
Yeah.
But I think we've kind of gone on this question for quite a bit and
Yeah, that was
diverged a
pretty-
little bit.
Yeah.
So
That was going to be expected with the dialogue because it's just
Mhm.
yeah.
just a mountain on that.
So why don't we have Queen Chicken read off number 5?
What are your thoughts on the in-game unlockables that you receive, such as costumes, weapons, difficulty modes, and etc.?
Yes.
Real quick, fuck,
Mhm.
that freaking forest, the
Oh,
grenade
the-
zombie.
Wow.
One dangerous
I-
zombie.
Dangerous zombie.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, I hate that game mode. I hate you can turn it off. It's stupid. Like, why? Why? Who hurt you, Capcom? Who hurt you? Because you hurt me right now. Yeah,
Really?
Kamikaze Zombie. Yeah, fuck that.
I think after a while, he actually despawns when you get to a certain point in the game.
Yeah, he despawns though, but God
Yeah,
forbid
There's
you
certain
accidentally
parts of the
use a
game where
defense item.
he can't get involved. Yeah.
He
Yeah,
will
when-
despawn once you go into the second guest house. After you get into the second guest house, he's no longer an issue.
Yeah, but my
the
issue
depth
is though,
mask
God
section.
forbid that you guys didn't shoot the man or freaking put a defense item because he can grab you, right? I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. So I liked the challenge initially, but I think that they should have had that as a separate modifier instead of being like a thing of like, oh yeah, you're just gonna face him every single time you do a new game plus run. because that gets really annoying, especially if you're trying to do some unlocks. It's easy to avoid him and learn how to bait him and stuff like that, but when you're just trying to speed run through the game or learn how to get some of the other unlocks, it can be a hassle to deal with. As far as like some of the other unlocks are concerned, I really enjoy unlocking like the alternate costumes in Resident Evil 1 in general. I love how they have that hidden room behind the painting, like what either RE, because I didn't know about this for the longest time until like I don't know, maybe like 7-8 years ago, something like that, maybe a little bit longer than that, where there was a hidden room behind that painting, and once you go through it's just so fucking crazy, but it fits so well with the whole layout of that mansion because it is genuinely crazy.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I also like how in the remake you get Barry's Samurai Edge with infinite ammo, no less,
Yeah.
and it has a faster fire rate. It is one of the coolest unlocks in any RE game, I
And
think.
Barry had the best guns, so I mean,
Yeah.
and that proves it.
Yep.
I mean, he had the best connections to Kendo, so
Yep.
So if you had to toss out a mode between one dangerous zombie and invisible enemies, which one do you toss?
One dangerous zombie, because at least invisible enemy, just put that shit in easy mode and not worry about anything.
Really?
yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, like, I think both of them to me are kind of one and dones, anyways. Like, you know, it's a cool, cute kind of gimmick, I guess. But like, once you've gone through it once, it's like, would you ever really do it again? I don't
Well,
think
one
so.
dangerous zombie is on by default anyway, so if you're going
Yeah,
to play
yeah,
the game
you know what I
again,
mean.
you have to. But unless you start a new game, of course. But in case of invisible enemy, yeah, once you've done once, that's it. There's no point in doing it again.
You've also got the real survival stuff as well.
Now, Real Survivor, I do
Take it
like
off.
That's a
now
great
because
mode.
it makes you think extra hard on where to put your items at and what to take with you throughout your journey. Because otherwise, it's gone for good. With something that I wish Resident Evil 2 did, Remake 2. I think that would be a great place to do Real Survivor, considering how vast the locations are, how many item boxes are there. So, like, okay, so I want to take this with me, but you know, I want the risk of not having this with me later down the line, like say the Nest 2 or whatever, right? That's the best opportunity I have on sport to have, not have Real Survivor.
Yeah, there's always going to be a section I think prefer it that way. Although for your general just player, like I think would find that excessively tedious, and I would suggest perhaps an example of something similar to that being excessively tedious. We're going to talk about in about 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's I don't mind real survival. I thought that, of course, like Brandon said, it made you think, it made you decide where you're gonna place your items, how you plan for the next trip, etc. And also, I mean, if you play as Jill anyway, then you hold like 8 slots, so it's kind of a little bit easier dealing with real survival with her.
Yeah, real survival with Chris is
brutal.
It's not so much that it's brutal; it can be very tedious at times,
Yeah.
and just tons and tons of backtracking, which is not always the most fun, especially if you're still not particularly familiar with the game. You don't know what you are and aren't going to need. Yeah, it is a lot of busy work. Go to show why it didn't make the original cut.
Unless you play like 6 runs like I did and you just memorize everything, it's pretty much easier that way.
Can I really quick talk about the additional BSAA costumes really
Sure.
quick? Because those were unlocked by default. You didn't have to play the game or anything. You could just you didn't have to beat the game. You could just use them from the start.
I don't use Chris's because the voices just don't match, man. Is that the same?
Chris's is so like out there because his face does not match the voice, but Jill's works because they were still using Julia Vaught's character model for RE5, so it makes sense in that context. And I actually do like running around with the BSAA costume.
Yeah, that's my main one as well. Like,
Yeah,
not
Code
use it.
Veronica Chris I always had a lot of fun with, because it still kind of made like it fit and it made a bit of sense.
Yeah,
of the design.
from a lore perspective, the body armor that he's wearing is actually better than what he had at the during the mansion incident. But otherwise, it is a really cool costume to run around with, and I do agree.
Yeah, I've got a soft spot for Code Veronica Chris as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I think. Oh yeah, and then
Veronica
there's
Chris
also
is overrated.
RE3 Jill, which fits well.
Oh yeah, of course, because it happened in the same year, so naturally it would fit fine.
Yeah. But I thought that was I thought it was a really cool addition for them to have that as just like, here you could just have these unlockable from the get-go. Like you didn't have to do anything to beat the game or
certainly.
do anything specific.
Nice.
I just
not having
wish
to pay
they
like
would've-
$5.99 for the privilege.
Yeah, I just wish they would have done more. And again, we'll get to that when we talk about RE0 because yeah, they needed to add in more in my opinion.
That looks so off in the chat. Fucking hell, dude.
Well, he's on cocaine.
This is cursed. This is cursed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Chris did that's actually one thing. They did not bring back his RE2 design ever in later games
No.
because he wasn't RE2 because on his models you didn't get made for that game. Just his voice is not.
Yeah, he has like elbow pads, and I think the Made in Heaven logo is like on his back, so that's kind of cool. But they never brought that back.
No.
I just like how Chris always looked kind of Japanese, and then all of a sudden he's just a really, really American.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
Yeah,
He's
both
a
Claire
really-
and freaking Chris look Asian.
Yeah, and then he's like super roided out too. Like his biceps are bigger than his head at one
Mhm.
point. So it's just. It's
So
good.
Chris always been like the big kid, of the RE series. Hell,
Yeah.
even like Resident Evil 2, for example, when he uses a super shotgun, he doesn't flinch, unlike Leon.
Yes,
Mhm.
which is a nice touch. It's amusing.
Hell, he also hydro with one hand in Resident Evil 5.
The only other things I remember is the commando costume that Jill gets, that people compare to Sarah Connor, but I don't see it because the color scheme is like different because it's green. And the other one where Chris is like some Mexican or something. It's from a movie called The Mexican. Like I just forget what it was, but I know Brad Pitt wore that costume.
Talk about the one where he's
Where he
Red
has like the
beanie and a red
red, the red shirt and the
I posted that in
goggles.
chat earlier.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, it's a weird it's kind of like a totally left field throw in, like out of almost completely nowhere.
There's also like cut concepts of Chris wearing like a karate outfit, but that was like just to flex the animations. Apparently they never added it into the game, as well as there was these screenshots where Jill is initiating a karate kick. So I mean, they were obviously playing with things. There's also like a gun as well that has laser sighting that burns like the place. If you look at the concepts of RE1, it's very interesting, the stuff they were toying with the game to mess with the physics. Chris and Street
can I
Fighter.
just say really quick, I think they should have brought in some of the alternate stars uniforms as well from the other ports of RE1 into Remake. Like I really like the ones they did for Chris in particular. Like the director's cut one that he has, where it's a little bit similar to Jill's, but like a male version of that costume. And then the alternate color scheme one, where he's got like basically like the typical navy blue style of police uniform with body armor.
Yeah, he kind of looks like Leon a little bit in that image, but it is more content. I like Ninja Chris personally.
Ninja Chris would have been cool too, or like I also like the motorcycle jacket that he's got in the with the Made in Heaven jacket. Like that would have been really cool too.
Oh, yeah, see that in Remake, that'd be great.
Yeah, that costume, well, not the costume itself, but at least the jacket, you can still see it in Remake too.
What about Leather Daddy, Chris, in Resident Evil 5? Why don't we bring that back?
Oh God!
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
We run into
you know what? That's kind of like a it was Road Warrior Chris.
Road Warrior, yeah.
It's I want to say it's a fucking reference to Mad Max.
It has to be, considering the location.
It's even that,
Nebraska is not Australia though, but it fits.
It's very Mad Max. So I mean, I don't know. If he just had a leather jacket to go with it, then
But you gotta go with Sailor Chris.
no.
Sailor Chris, I remember that.
Don't dare disrespect that.
Moving swiftly on,
Look at them kneecaps,
Worst
though.
Chris design. Holy shit, no.
Bro, in the concept art, they like emphasize the heck out of his butt in that costume. I'm not
Oh,
I'm not
yes.
lying.
Yeah, they
No.
Chris, man, they have boulders back there, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
Boulders.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, I think we got a good good laugh out of this question. So why don't we have Austin read off number 6?
All right. Number 6. Is there anything you particularly dislike about this game in comparison to the original?
Yes, freaking forest. Fuck them. Also, the shotgun changes. I don't like that, but yeah.
I felt it was a bit too easy with some of the bosses, but that's about it.
Yeah, the
Uh,
bosses aren't particularly challenging. I think I'd venture that.
So I have a bit of a hot take on the soundtrack. There are aspects of the original soundtrack that I prefer over the remake soundtrack.
That's not even a hot take, though. I'm pretty sure somebody will say the same thing.
Not really, because I hear a lot of people really love the remake soundtrack. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good soundtrack, though, but it's still going to be pieces in there that I will personally, at least, will say I enjoy more in the original over the remake. You know, I mean, it's not an uncommon opinion to hear.
Yeah,
About
I don't think either was like particularly outstanding. Both had their moments though.
Well, and then there was also the the Deadly Silence take on those soundtracks as well, which did a completely like remixed take, I guess.
Rearranged.
Those are good as well. Yeah, I don't know. Like some of the tracks from the original soundtrack, I really like. I actually prefer the original sound for the save room over the remake. I also prefer the what was the track? The Meeting Rebecca track I prefer in the original over the
Same here.
remake. And I also prefer the one there's one where when Chris and Jill reunite when one of them is in the cell, they play a track called Long Lost Friend. It's a really good track in the original, at least in my opinion, and I actually used it in my Resident Evil 1 review. So it was just one of those things where I just felt like some of those tracks were just so much better done in the original.
Some of those tracks did fit the mood better, though. But considering the tonal difference between remake and classic, though, it makes sense for them to change it for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, like some of those rooms I understand, like and tonally speaking, it makes sense why they would have a more dreadful sound for like these more dark and atmospheric rooms. So I get that, but then there are some where I'm just like, I don't really, and not to say that I hate those new tracks. I like those new renditions. I just have a preference for the other. It's not so much that I even don't care for them. It's just that I have a preference for one over the other. Which oddly enough, on the for the 20th anniversary, Capcom released a PS4 theme, which has like, if I'm not mistaken, it has like PlayStation 1 sound effects.
No, it's remake 1 sound background, but the configuration sound, like left, right, whatever, confirming, is from the original game.
Yeah, it was like something like that. And then the save music was I want to say was from either the remake or the original.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The background is remake. The sound effect, the song they have in the background is the save room theme from remake. Wow, everything else.
And then the sound effects were the original, which is what I was gonna say. Which I really like that kind of blend, I guess. But it is what it is. It's probably one of my favorite PS4 themes on an unrelated note. So, but yeah, that's where I kind of dislike things.
Oh, actually, I got one more thing to add. There's one thing I would say is that the graphical art style they have for this applies to both remake and zero, but more zero so by comparison. I don't like how uncolorful the game is comparison to like the original. The original is like all sunshine and rainbows, bright in your face, right? Though, but at least it had color with its art style. Versus here, it's like they improve everything. Like the environments look better though, but the color is just bland. Which,
It's
given
very
the time
gritty.
period, it makes sense. But still, I don't think it aged particularly well in contrast to something that's a bit more colorful.
It's like a lot of like dark greens and like gritty filters on
Like
almost
grays
everything.
and browns, maybe a
Yeah.
little red in there.
It's very like brownish.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
probably tells its story that people's basically here either like little sort of nitpicky bits and pieces or just personal preferences. I think tells
Yeah.
the story of the strength of the game as a whole. Really, no one's got anything particularly bad to say about it, you know. But it didn't sell great, which is just kind of a shame, really. And I think that's why I was so glad when it was getting the HD remaster, because it gave a chance for a ton of people to be able to enjoy the game for what it was. And you know, I think
I'm glad you said that, because I remember I was being told that both Zero and Remake sold very well on GameCube,
Oh,
which
okay,
I
here
knew
we go.
was I knew was fucking false as shit.
Yeah. It's
Especially after like Capcom was like, "Hey, here's our platinum title list. Oh, by the way, did you know that Remake and Zero sold way higher than they did before?" Yeah.
It's
Jesus.
it's part of the reason we didn't get RE2 until we did, because Resident Evil came out, people liked it, and then Capcom put out Resident Evil 0, and people didn't like it. I liked it, but I was like one of a handful. And then Capcom went, "See, people don't want Resident Evil games. Shut it down."
Well,
And then
Oh, not completely true. Like, you're on the money though, but that's like half true for the most part. The
Right.
thing that they sabotage themselves by putting it only on the GameCube, which
Yeah.
again, like the install base is tiny. Well, actually, none at all, because Resident Evil started with PlayStation, right? So literally, like, let's say 90% of your fan base is going to be on that platform, in contrast to Nintendo, which only had one game, which is 2. So like, they shot themselves in the foot there by doing that.
At the time, it would have made more sense to maybe jump from PlayStation to Xbox, because a lot of people who had played Resident Evil might have also played it on the Dreamcast, because Dreamcast was also a place where Resident Evil was at. So that would have at least made a little bit more sense. But Resident Evil really wasn't associated with Nintendo. So that was one reason why it didn't do well, and that's why I kind of threw Shinji Mikami under the bus. People like to praise that producer, director, but also forget that he's also the reason why Resident Evil went the way that it did for a couple of years, with things like Resident Evil 4, which is another thing where Resident Evil 4 came out, and then they saw how well it sold on GameCube, and they were like, "Hey, why don't we put it on PlayStation 2?" Even though Mikami said he was going to cut his head off, still waiting for that. And then it sold even better on PlayStation 2, and so on and so forth, when it got re-released in every other platform known to man. So that's part of the reason. But then there's another part of the reason too, which I know Ren talked about at one point, which was the developers were just getting tired of that particular play style for Resident Evil.
Yeah, I think we've upset like probably thousands of purists, but you know, it's the same routine. It's just the developers said it themselves that they wanted to try something new, and they obviously did. So can't really get mad about it. It came from the horse's mouth.
but I didn't get my copy of Resident Evil 2 that I wanted. That's what matters. It's for
Oh,
me.
boy.
I don't even know how to respond to this.
yeah, it's
It's all for me. That's it.
I mean,
Can we pick him?
I understand like both sides and what they want, if they're being like, you know, super defensive about it is whatever, but I understand why he moved on from it. It's just something we've talked about like thousands of times
A
over.
million
On literally every podcast
Yeah.
with Resident Evil involved, like ever in history.
Yeah.
I do think, and because we're gonna move on to RE0 in a little bit, but like RE0 in particular, there's a lot of rooms towards the end of the game where they're shot for shot like Resident Evil 2. So they could have easily have done this remake for RE2 years before we even got the remake that we have now. But on GameCube, with the playstyle that we were more familiar with at the time. So I don't think it was necessarily impossible. It's just that a lot of things that factored into what eventually led us to RE4 and how the series is now is what ended up happening.
Honestly, for me, it's just a big boomer take. To be quite fair, I did get Resident Evil 2 and 3 seamless HD, so I'm happy. Like, I'm good with that. That's what I get for the rest of my life.
Amen for that.
But like, man, if I could have seen some of that stuff at the time in Resident Evil 2 remade in the same way as Resident Evil 1, like, God, when I heard that they weren't moving forward with that, I was so mad.
I mean, look at bright side though. At least it would have been a more faithful adaptation of a remake compared to
Yeah.
what we got now, which is still good on my head, which is one of my favorite games
Speaking
ever.
of, that's a
saying-
nice, decent segue to the next question.
Yep, you're right.
What's up?
You're
Yeah,
right.
you want to
That's
read off 6B?
Yeah, I might as well. I was the one who pitched it.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. Speaking of the recent remakes, do peeps here think that that's the way that this was a better way, i.e., Resident Evil Remake 1 was a better way to handle the remake compared to the recent iterations for Resident Evil 2 and 3, or is it not fair to judge them together?
Can I go first on this one? I
Yeah, don't
have a
take
lot to
forever.
say. So as I was trying to say earlier about this subject, I think that like Resident Evil 1 remake is a perfect remake, and because of that, like fans of Resident Evil are kind of spoiled by how Resident Evil remake should be like. Understandably so, because that was a very high bar to set. So, you know, the fact that Capcom set that bar themselves is really on them for doing that. That being said, with the RE2 and 3 remakes, I do also feel that it is slightly unfair to just judge them on the sole merit that they are remakes of these classics that, you know, are still great in their own right. Because I do think that the direction that they might have taken these remakes in, they're not necessarily like bad. Like I know a lot of people say that RE3 remake is like one of the worst like remakes ever made, but I'm like, or
It's just not.
worst
Absolutely.
RE games, and I'm like,
Like
have
the
you guys
worst?
played?
Absolutely no.
Yeah, like,
Completely.
I can understand like I could understand maybe like underwhelming remake or to a degree worst remake. I could understand from that perspective, but to say worst Resident Evil game, like have you
Yeah.
guys played Umbrella Corps? Have you played Gaiden?
yeah, I wouldn't
Have
go that
you
far.
played
Games of the year
like-
easily. I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
with the plethora of the amount of
Hey,
videos
play
as
Zero?
well that were just bashing Resident Evil 3 on YouTube, it made me kind of sick, really. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
That was the same thing that was happening recently with like RE Village, where a lot of people were coming out of the woodwork saying like, "Oh, Village was really bad because it's basically like a watered down RE4."
Yeah.
Oh
This-
Lord, that conversation.
Unfortunately, this is a symptom of the horrendously knee-jerk social media world we currently occupy. You know, where it's just like the worst takes, just that the first ones that are uttered, which are completely baseless, and then everyone's like, "Oh, it's God!" And it's just, oh,
I think it's an issue of it's either a problem of not well thought out takes or just takes that are done that are overthought. And by overthought, I mean in the sense that like people are just looking way too deep into it and not taking something into like
Yeah.
face value. I guess.
sometimes that it's sometimes it's either ignorant or just completely disingenuous. But
Look, I'm gonna say it's the RE fan syndrome. Complain, next game comes out, buy game. It's the same cycle
they're the
all
car
over again.
fans.
That's
That
any
Ryan-
fan.
I like how
You
that
just
Ryan-
named every fan in existence.
Yeah. The
Well, I
same
don't know.
thing.
There's some people out there that will stand their ground though, but and like RE in particular, like
Oh
it's
no,
just,
not for Ari.
No,
No.
no. It's like that very special fandom that will complain by the next one. Like they say that I will never buy the next game, or but the next one will continue to outsell the previous title. Case in point, look at Resident Evil 7, 2, and 8. Like those games sold really well. 3 sold well enough total, but unfortunately, given the circumstances, though, it kind of like declined compared to RE2, right? But other than that, though, it's still sold really well by comparison.
Look,
Most of
Yeah.
them.
It's
remember
funny to
when,
me because like I'm glad you brought that up too, because like a lot of people were saying like they wouldn't buy these like remakes and shit, but we know they did, and it's like, you know, it's funny because like I didn't buy RE7 at all. Like I got it for free because other people gave it to me, and then I also had it was free on PlayStation Plus at one point, so I got it from that. But I technically don't own the license to that game because it's a PlayStation Plus license. That being said, I never paid for that game, and I still to this day refuse to buy that game because I think it's one of the worst RE games to ever come out. I genuinely feel that way, and I know I'm gonna rustle some jimmies there when I say that, but like, you know, that being said, when you see other RE fans say that they're not gonna buy the next game, they're not gonna stick with that.
Here's the
yeah.
problem. The problem is that every time people say this, they make these stupid outlandish statements. We've talked about them before, where they're like, "Well, 4 was the downfall of the series and whatnot. It was the worst thing in the world." And then they buy 4 remake because they're curious to see how it turns out to validate what they think in their mind. They're gonna do the same when it comes out, like 2 years from now or something, or we get news on that, because we know Capcom is working on it, and it's going to be the same sort of debate when it comes out.
They did the same thing with Revelations, and that kind of like slapped them in the face because then they ended up saying like it was a great game.
Yeah, so it's just I gotta agree with Shadow. It's preemptive, knee-jerk reactions. I don't really believe in the word boycott when people say it, because they end up either playing it anyway or they end up supporting it somehow, some way, and it just ends up being, it is what it is.
It does come down to context a little bit, though. The reason I pitched is because when Resident Evil 2 Remake came out, I got asked by I don't even know how many people about, like, is this the right thing for them to do? Because it was such a departure for the series to go down the direction compared to anything else they've ever done. And again, the whole point was people were kind of saying, well, why don't they do it like Resident Evil Remake 1? You know, why do it in this totally different way? And I'm like, well, those two games were 6 years apart. This is like nearly 20. You can't do a game like Resident Evil Remake 1 nowadays. It just doesn't make sense anymore. You know, and that was an argument,
but only in the indie market where that's very
exactly
niche. So
for a widespread sort of video gaming audience, unfortunately, it's passe. And I think like when 3 years ago, when Remake 2 was like on its way out, I think it was a totally legitimate question to ask. And I think it's good that people were asking with some degree of sincerity, like, is this really the best direction for it? Now, as it personally speaking, as it came out, the game was widely acclaimed. I think it's probably one of the best Resident Evils I think they ever did. Resident Evil Remake 2, especially for people who've never touched the series before as an entry point into what is Resident Evil. I think it's a fantastic way of introducing the series to it.
I'm glad you said that too, because you made a good point though. Like, I forgot to bring this up myself, is the playstyle differences. Because how are they going to adapt that with how are they going to remake it and adapt it to like over the shoulder and whatnot? Because to the credit though, they try to do other stuff like first person and fixed cams, but third person was the best option to go with. So
there was several people I remember that I had an argument with about this, say, oh well, they shouldn't call it a remake, they should call this a remaster. I'm like,
it's not a remaster either. You guys know the freaking definition of these words.
Yeah,
no, then again, Capcom doesn't either, because 3 is more of a retelling more so than a remake.
They use reimagining for that one. Yeah.
Sorry.
They believe it or not, they on Resident Evil 4 HD, they have it listed on PS3 as HD remake. So
oh my god,
take that for what you will.
Well,
yeah, so yeah, they don't know the definitions either.
Capcom is notorious for misspelling and misinterpreting things, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Don't read anything to it. Yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to bring up on this point, and then I'll finish, is that I think it's a product of time periods with these remakes. Clearly, the reason why, and I think if they made like RE2 Remake exclusively on the GameCube during that time period, I think the game would have suffered the same fate of being on one console and the sales not being as strong as they want it to be. So honestly, sales-wise, I think it would have been a great game quality-wise, but sales-wise, I think it would have bombed.
I think what would have happened is we would have alternate timeline shit, right? But like, if they had done RE2 and 3 Remake way sooner and did them on GameCube the same way they did Remake, like Ren said, probably would have been quality ass games, the perfect remakes for those games. But in turn, it would mean that if you didn't have a GameCube, you weren't fucking playing it. And then years later, they would have done an HD, potentially would have done an HD remaster.
And I would have my 2 dream games, and I could die in peace.
You know, I was okay. But I want to add to that too, Dom. If they did that, then that party, if those games were made on GameCube, remade at the time, I'm pretty sure it was those games flopping because people asked for those remakes too at the time, right? I'm pretty sure Capcom would not be doing remakes anymore if those games, flopped at the time.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have done remakes, but I'm saying like they would have potentially if things lined up similarly, right, they would have done remasters of those GameCube ports.
No, I know what you mean though, but hear me out though. I'm saying
Yeah.
like since at the time people were asking for remakes of 2 and 3, back then when 1 came out, like there were very few, right? So if they Capcom did it with that fanfare and it flopped though, that would discourage Capcom from doing more remakes. So we probably would have not gotten Resident Evil 4 anytime soon or at all if we
Potentially, yeah.
compare it to current year.
Yeah, I
Potentially,
said
yeah, that could have killed the series too. Yeah, you got a good point.
yeah, I said that in chat. Like the series probably would have been done because they were putting all their eggs in one basket on RE4, and they mentioned that's the reason why they didn't do like a Resident Evil 2 remake, because they didn't want it to interfere with the sales of that.
Well, and I gotta bring this up again, and I know it's like beating a dead horse, but
Oh man.
you have Shinji Mikami to thank for this whole situation, right? Everybody who likes to put this man on a pedestal, this beautiful Japanese bastard, they love to put him on a pedestal, but they never want to acknowledge the fact that he was the one that led RE into action and over the shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Not to mention, Paul Anderson is also the reason why Resident Evil 4 went more action too.
Now,
Really?
where's Paul Anderson's platform? Where's his stand? Where's his trophy cabinet?
Oh, it's dead in the
world is
ground,
unjust,
believe
though.
me.
Is Laser Room in RE4 inspired by Resident Evil 1, the movie?
I want to make a quick point on this, and I'll be quick because I know we got to kind of move on.
Yeah, yeah, we got to move on.
I know I have a lot of boomer ass takes in chat all the time because I'm one of those people. But as much as I would have loved the 2 and 3 remade like 1, I can enjoy those without ruining my nostalgia goggles or my enjoyment for the original games, if that makes any kind of sense. Like I look at 2 and I look at 3 remake and I look at this new era of Resident Evil, and it's still fun. I still enjoy it, but I still have the old stuff I can go back to. I just like to be like the old man on the porch and complain about it every once in a while.
That's how I feel
Exactly.
with,
Yeah.
That's how I feel with 3. Like I just play the original. Like if I'm not satisfied enough with playing the remake, right? Because unlike remake 1 though, which is effectively can replace the original as far as like everything, right? But
Yeah.
with 2 and 3 remake though, they're pretty much like a different take of the original 2 games. So if something
Yeah.
that you like about these 2, you can always play those 2.
Yeah.
That's why Maximilian dude says that Resident Evil 2 remake is kind of a perfect remake in the aspect that it makes the original, where its qualities that beat the remake, shine even better. It makes you want to replay the original as well as also appreciate what the remake does.
I
Yeah.
can see that.
If only it was more nuanced takes in the world like that, as opposed to Purist Land where it's all bad, everything's
I mean,
bad.
Bad.
Like
No
even I
camera
like-
angles. Ugh.
I like to crack my monster and I like to scream at all the kids because they're enjoying the new thing. Resident Evil. But that being said, it's like I'm not the target demographic anymore, and games change. That's just the way. I mean, Doom changed for the better. I played Doom since I was a kid, and I was like, when there was a Doom game coming out, I freaked, and then I played it, and I was like, oh, this is actually way better than like it's awesome as its own thing. Cool.
Yeah, Doom and Doom Eternal.
Rip
Like,
and
those are like
tear.
those are the peak examples of like taking the old, mixing it with the new, and you just have your definitive experience. Unlike Doom 3.
It's like just
well,
slow pace.
mm.
Well, I'm sure you like that game.
Doom
Don't
3
you,
is,
David?
is an interesting game, but no,
Yeah.
it is.
Not to
Another
mention that Doom, well, going off a little bit off topic, Doom, basically in the text and like lore, it makes all the like custom maps and mods of like the original Doom canon. Because apparently the Doom guy's been going through parallel universes and worlds this entire time. So which I thought was really cool that they would connect like, oh yeah, you know, like brutal Doom mod or just map levels and shit. Oh yeah, that's canon. It's just different storylines of the Doom guy. I was like, that's actually really awesome.
Anyway, I'll go on and read off the first question for RE0. So, did you hear about the story that Resident Evil 0 was originally going to be developed for the N64? Give your take on that version if you have seen it. Yes,
Oh,
I did,
yes.
and it's such a cool thing because like somebody will probably post the video that Capcom put up on their official Resident Evil channel, where they captured higher quality footage of that original N64 build. But man, it was so cool because it was gonna tie in so well with the original RE1 and explaining how like they whose hand that belonged to in the beginning of that RE1 intro that they find. Uh and they were gonna also have things like Rebecca or Billy could potentially die like permanently in your playthrough, and you can complete
Oh,
the game in different ways. Or
Yeah, like
really cool thing with Rebecca in
yeah.
particular, they were going to explain like her losing like pieces of her body armor, like the shoulder pads and the beret, as the story progressed. So I just wish we could have gotten that build.
yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, it looked amazing to play as. The only thing I just don't like is the permadeath situation. I'm like, that's a little more, too frustrating, to be quite honest, though, because especially if something catches you by surprise, like a trap or whatever. Because like we could have our own boulder scene in Zero, we wouldn't know right at the time. So like to have that permadeath system is like was sucked honestly on initial playthrough. But besides that, though, I would have loved to play that version of the game, though, just for like old time's sake. Like I'm very curious.
I think it
But
would
I
have
got
good.
I'll say, but I gotta ask though, like, why the N64? Because again, like, your install base is on PlayStation, so like, why you develop this one exclusively on the 64?
Do you want history context? Because
Yeah.
I know it.
After Ren talking, and yeah, give me that.
Okay, so I was just gonna say, like, I think maybe the AI feature for the AI dying or whatever, and continuing the story on from there. If the weapons were great and if the AI wasn't stupid, I think it could have worked. But I do realize the fact that AI in video games and NPCs and companions aren't really the best, and they weren't like for quite some time until they made them like unkillable. So I can see people being frustrated in that regard, saying, "Hey Billy, you need to be near me. Stop being around the fucking tyrant." And oh wait, you're dead. Never mind. So I could see that creeping in, but storyline wise, I would have loved to see how it went. And I think we were talking about this in the horror Discord, where if Billy actually did die in canon, then they could probably get away with that, considering he hasn't been in the series for a long time, and they didn't even bother to reference
him.
Yeah,
the
those
latest-
freaking snapped out of existence. That's why.
I think like the latest incarnation of Billy is like in one of the books, and he's in there for like a brief moment, either as a reference or as a small cameo.
Well, the bugs
Yes.
themselves aren't even necessarily canon, so like even you still can count that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the context to why it was on GameCube, again going back to
GameCube. N64. I'm talking about GameCube.
GameCube. Well, both actually. The reason why I was on GameCube and N64 initially, our oh so great savior Shinji Mikami with his brilliant fucking ideas. He like many Japanese developers at the time fucking hated developing for the PlayStation. I mean, absolutely hated it, because a lot of Japanese developers at the time just felt like it was very complicated and just not very easy to develop for. But they had no choice but to develop for it, because a lot of games at that time were just selling better on PlayStation. So the original PlayStation as well as the PlayStation 2, and yes, I would be like that, Chris. But a lot of those games, they were selling hot on those consoles, so it makes sense why a lot of higher ups wanted these games specifically on
Studio
on the
Mendeling.
PlayStation. Yeah. So because of Capcom's specific contract to have at least 3 of the Resident Evil games on PlayStation with Sony, or at least they had to be developed for the PlayStation. They could not be exclusive to any particular platform other than Sony. So with Zero and some of the other games that came after that, the reason why a lot of these, and well, initially RE0 with the N64 port, and then the GameCube games that we got, which was 0, Remake, and 4. The reason that those were on GameCube was because of the fact that Capcom was no longer contractually tied to releasing the Resident Evil on PlayStation per se, because they only had a 3-game contract. Also partially because Shinji Mikami's a fucking idiot, and he really just didn't want to develop for a console that would have sold some more copies for any of his games. So,
Breach.
dude, I will roast Shinji Mikami till the end of time. Okay, like
We can tell.
I was like, I think this is the most he has been roasted on air, which is funny. It's all funny to me.
Shinji, we love you,
so, right?
but you're not
Like,
perfect, man.
I mean, if we can realize this is over like almost 20 years ago, and 15 because of Resident Evil 4.
And you can
Well-
tell it's been stewing all that time.
like keep in mind, like I got into RE late with like RE5 being my first game, but like, you know, that being said, when like I know the context to like why these things happen the way that they did, like it pisses me off because I see so many like there's so many people in the community that try to act like Shinji Mikami can do absolutely no wrong and that he's like this perfect developer and he knows everything there is to know about survival horror, when a lot of people forget that even with RE1 people told him to scale his shit down because he had no direction as to like where that game was supposed to go. Anyway,
Yeah, and when he gets free
Tangent
reign,
aside.
you get something like The Evil Within, which we know how that turned out.
Yeah, amazing, but imperfect. Imperfect masterpiece.
I really like Evil Within.
I do too, but 2/3 of the way through the game, it goes crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That'd be crazy though.
it is not the game
You know-
that it is not the game that Ikumi Nakamura wanted. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
much.
I
you know,
enjoy
Shinji's best game, as far as him going crazy, was Vanquish. That's because, given setting and the nuances, though, it makes sense for it. But again, another subject.
Anyway, does somebody else want to go on this subject?
Yeah, you know, looking at the footage from the original Resident Evil 0, it's kind of the same feeling as do you guys remember StarCraft Ghost when that was going to come out?
I think so.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to. That
Yeah,
game was a
that's
tragedy in itself.
That was gonna, because I played a lot of StarCraft as a kid, and that was like the coolest looking thing, and it's the like one of the biggest pieces of lost potential in my eyes as far as like vaporware. And I mean, at least there's a version of this that exists somewhere for Resident Evil 0. But man, it's like it's the same kind of feeling. It's like, oh my god, I want to play that. Like you were saying earlier, I want to play that vision, that idea right there.
The funny thing about all this is that Capcom actually legit, because you know how people have like old beta builds and they get rid of them. Capcom legitimately like has a copy of this game in their office and they're doing nothing with it in terms of like saying, hey, maybe if you people on Steam want to play like a little bit of this version, you can totally do that. They're not doing anything with it at all.
Yeah, Sega has done that. With their,
Capcom legitimately has an archive in their basement with like a bunch of like old game files, which is how I think they even showed that in that video where they talk about RE0, where they just pull it out. And I don't know if they're using like an upscaler to capture the footage or if they like found a way to convert the files from that old like floppy disk onto a like a digital file to make it more readable and compatible with modern hardware. But like if they can get it running on modern PCs, why can't I get this version of the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the Hookman demo for 4. Like I want to play that vision. You know what I mean? I want to try that.
Mhm.
That looks cool.
Thankfully, there's a build out there somewhere that you can actually play it legit though. But like, it'd be interesting to see where Resident Evil 4, where Resident Evil could have gone if 4 turned out the way it did with the Hookman.
The Hookman was entirely a fucking mind fuck by Mikami.
So
I remember-
go ahead.
I say like I remember watching actual like an old trailer for the Hookman demo and aesthetics, and I just remember showing it to my dad, and he was like, "This like," because he also Resident Evil 4 is one of his favorite Resident Evil games, and he was completely like shocked at what I showed him. I was like, "Yeah, same here, Dad." It's just like I said, it just would be nice to see where would these visions have gone.
Mhm.
It's like 64-0.
But anyone
That's
else before we move on?
Not really, not me.
Okay, I guess we can move on to number 8, so I'll read that. So what are your initial impressions of the quality of Resident Evil 0's final build? Cite your love and criticism for how it was handled. We're going to be here all day, folks.
So I'll be
Uh, Yeah, David, you go first though, because
I'll be fast because I'm going to be in the minority here. But I unabashedly love this game. I think the creature design is awesome. I think it's.
I agree.
I think it's neat. I think it's a fun game. I think getting rid of item boxes and just dropping stuff on the floor is cool. Mixing it up just enough, and that's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm a
it's hard not to look at it and kind of think of it as like a remake 2.0, because obviously it's the exact same engine, so it's hard not to look at it that way.
I mean, to technicality, it kind of was a remake of it itself, considering the original one got canceled. But
Yes, this is also true. It's a game of, I think there's a lot of kind of nichey sort of ideas, again, like the inventory has been talked about, and the whole duality system as well, which I think it's nice for them to have had a crack at it. Whether you think it worked out pretty well is, again, a bit mileage may vary. But I think that's kind of to me its legacy. It's a collection of not very often used ideas, kind of all thrown together, and having a crack at it. It's a bit of an experiment to me, I think, is Zero. I don't know if that's a fair way of looking at it.
I mean, yeah, because some ideas, well, a few ideas that did carry over to later games. Say like the co-op system, right? Now, Resident Evil 4 has a command system though, but you only tell Ashley to sit there and move though. But at least in later games though, you have an actual system where you can play with another player that you didn't have with Zero.
Hmm.
But
Also, there's one thing I want to mention real quick before you finish, Brandon. The original build of Resident Evil 0, they did plan to have some local co-op. That was a thing.
Really?
Yep, that was a thing.
Nightmare.
So yeah, that probably would have been a huge nightmare.
But they did want to do the idea, so it is something that it was in the planning stage, then it got cut.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm gonna finish up though, because I want to start with my positives first. For starters, I like the idea of dropping and picking up items at will. Like, I think that was a nice little common sense change that should stay with the series, to be quite honest, because there's an item that I don't want or need, though. Can I just fucking drop it instead of just wasting time, go back to an item box? The Zero should have item boxes though, but the idea to drop itself is also really nice. So give us both, please. I'm just saying. No, nothing wrong with having us both. Also, I
agree with that.
the map layout of the game, because it's easy to pick up after your first playthrough, easy to remember, because I was able to blaze through the game after my initial playthrough on hard mode. Like, it's really nice to go through the game with this layout. And so I do enjoy doing that. The weapons are, well, it's kind of, I guess you could say, kind of generic, because it's just your typical Resident Evil loadout for the time that it came out. And I do like the 2-player system, because if this game, if it had online with the remaster though, it would have been a perfect co-op game in a way. It could have been our pseudo outbreak, something to hold us over for something similar for a while. We had one player do his task and another one doing that, trade items, this and that. It was a nice system, because you could get a lot of stuff done faster just by splitting up your Rebecca and Billy. Some of you know what you're doing, so I do love that a lot. Something I give it credit. Enemy design, yeah, it's fine, but not my favorite, but it's fine. Now the negatives. For starters, the game is balanced as shit. Not gonna front, especially on hard mode. I don't like how it's balanced. You get too little resources like healing items, which is awful, and you get very, very low ammo. I get it that it's a challenge though, but other games have done it better. I'm just gonna be honest. The AI is stupid, because I had times where Rebecca or Billy will aim at the enemy but not shoot, like, at all. Like, the thing could be literally 5 inches away from you and the AI won't shoot. I tested this out multiple times. It's stupid.
Yeah, they kind of wait for you to shoot it first, and then they'll kind of unload.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well with it.
They do that.
Another thing too is the auto lock. The auto lock is can be janky, because sometimes where this could be a zombie again right in front of me, right? But the character would aim to another enemy to the left. This happened to me while I was playing with Rebecca and going to like the RE2 area, the factory, I believe it was called. The hunter was in front of me, right? But Rebecca aimed at the other hunter that was off screen for some reason. So that got me hit and made me waste a shotgun shell too, which is annoying. Also, sometimes the character would aim at the wall. I don't know why that happens though, but it happened to me. But The biggest negative is the story. The story sucks. Not gonna front. You have instances where Rebecca gets bitten by a Eliminator and that doesn't get affected. Now, granted, though, not all creatures will affect characters when they get scratched, like within cutscenes. But still, like, she should have got something now that, or like when the leeches, Rebecca got covered in leeches, though, but she came out fine, whereas somebody else got affected. What the fuck?
Yeah, the game is a bit clumsy. I think is probably a fair way to describe it.
Yeah, like exposing Wesker as a big villain.
No, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people either remember or choose to remember. There are definitely some parts which either don't make a lot of sense or aren't particularly handled great, and it is a difficult game. But like, I don't think it's excess. It's bad in particular. It's just kind of clumsy.
One of the weaker ones. Like for me, the weakest ones is definitely 0, the remake, and 6. All of them for different reasons, not because they're bad. It's just like what they did wrong is something that holds the game back from its true potential.
I mean, the plot is pretty wacky. The whole, this whole facility, and I appreciate that it's kind of obviously trying to tie in lots of plot elements, which then come in later on, with Wesker and Birkin as well with the facility. There's lots of little kind of cute references to other games in the series and stuff that you'd be doing soon, which I appreciate. Like even taking the lift, for example, and moving it, getting ready for Resident Evil 2, stuff like that.
But that's a problem though with Wesker. Like when they show off Wesker that early, though, that kind of kills the element of surprise. Because think about it like this, though, it's a freaking prequel. Why are you showing stuff?
Yes, I mean this is true. However, I would argue that the game came out like nearly 8 years from the original, so
yeah, true, but it ties into the remake, which came a year prior. But since almost nothing like Rebecca's characterization does not freaking line up well from remake and 0. Which is a problem because she experienced things first, but she went from this cheerful to like almost angst type character in remake, and she's afraid of a hunter, even though she fought a freaking leech queen in a tyrant.
Yeah, I mean, there's some continuity issues, but like I don't think it's particularly egregious. And I think if you're gonna delve in, I think if you just a gamer, if you're going to start delving into prequels of games in a series, you've got to expect that there's going to be some plot points that could potentially be spoiled for you. I think that's just I
think the issue that like Brandon is having, and I agree with him on this point especially, is because like when RE0 was being made for N64, they were specifically making it to connect well with the original Resident Evil. So once they made it to connect with the remake for Resident Evil 1, they didn't really take that into consideration as to how it can connect well and how Rebecca's characterization would fit well going into remake if you were to play 0 first.
That's kind of one of the things I don't like, is because they tied some stuff in so well from remake 1 to RE2 to Code Veronica, and RE3 and all this other stuff, but they couldn't really do it that well for 0. That's why I can't really say 0 can get a pass just because of it, because they've already showed that they have the capability to put in all this plot tissue.
Yeah, and for the fact that it's a prequel, like, that hurts it even more, because at least with remake, though, it's a remake of the first game. So, like, you could at least do a better job connecting on dots versus making a new game that takes place before the original source of everything. So it's a problem. Like, again, exposing like certain conspiracies with Wesker too soon. You might as well play 0 after 1, which you shouldn't be doing that because, again, it's a prequel. Like, you should play in canon order. So that's
I mean, I highly doubt Resident Evil is the only series there's ever been to have effective spoilers of games.
I mean, it's not though, but it's the only one that I've experienced that actually effectively does something like this. That's really like you could say really bad to this degree. Like even Metal Gear was a series of retcons and whatnot doesn't do something like this.
Yeah, Metal Gear somehow it just. I know they retcon like a lot of stuff, but somehow it just fits in with the timeline they're trying to present over
They
the old one.
acknowledge the retcons in story too. Like
Yeah.
when you get to Metal Gear Solid 4, they're like, "Oh, it's just all nanomachines, son."
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, it's nanomachines. It's the reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They make fun of it in Revengeance. They're like, I have fucking nanomachines, son. They just hardened in response to physical trauma. Like it's like the series is self-aware at that point, and I think that's kind of the issue that Capcom has with like even now, like forget RE0 for just a second, right? Even now, just look at like some of the later REs that came out after like 3 and 4. Like they kind of just forget about some of the lore and just kind of do their own thing and don't really try to tie in well with what was established prior
Or
try to
another
build upon it. Like really quick, Brandon, like one of the reasons why I think Resident Evil 5 is a better game than RE4 is because it's more grounded in what the series had established at that point and is set in a more believable setting for that universe compared to what Resident Evil 4 did, where they, you know, started throwing in paranormal stuff and started to dabble with the occult and whatnot. Like some of those things can work well, but then other things where it's just like, well, why does it need to be paranormal when it's always been about biological hazards? You know what I'm saying? So
Also,
But,
Capcom's guilty of this with other franchises. Like again, the most recent one is Devil May Cry. Like they changed a lot of shit with 5, and they cherry picking the continuity. Of course, you go with Street Fighter, same thing. Or freaking even Mega Man, surprisingly, you know, they've been doing the same thing with that. So, well,
Yep,
I should say did.
they did it with Onimusha at one point as well, and Onimusha was one of their more consistent franchises. So
Exactly.
it just, I think it's an issue with like Capcom wanting to just do whatever they want, but not understanding that they need to have consistency and not just, if they want to do something new and experiment, then just do something new and experiment and not, you know, kind of force it into a well-established franchise, or at least in the case of a story, a well-established story that should be consistent.
Yeah, well, but it's like Divik, I'm in the minority. I really like Zero after replaying it last week. On normal, of course, because hard is really hard when you're going in with a lot of rust. But as I was going through it, I was streaming it. I was recording my thoughts at the same time. But after I actually beat Resident Evil 0, I came to the conclusion that if you prepare for 0, first playthroughs are going to suck for Resident Evil 0. First playthroughs for Resident Evil 1, though, is going to be like a journey. It's going to be something special. Resident Evil 0, not so much. So going back, like from like the inventory system to dropping items being a hassle, and both characters only having 6 slots, which also doesn't help in some cases, and shotguns and big items becoming 2 slots. If you prepare around that, I did, I quite enjoyed a little like arcadic style that Resident Evil 0 kind of brought to the table. I made one spot my like ammo and health dump because I didn't need all of it. And key items I would just leave on Rebecca most of the time. And when I knew there's such parts where they were going to split up, I made sure that each character had what they needed to either survive or get through the next section of the game. And doing so made it very much more enjoyable in my opinion. Not to mention, I liked the setting and the set pieces in Resident Evil 0 more than Resident Evil 1. Love the train sequence. I don't know why. I just thought the entire sequence on the train, it's more like confined. You're more in a tight space. I kind of really like that a lot more.
Yeah, I do like the train part a lot, though. That's probably a very, very highlight of the series, in my opinion. I wish they actually had a train station level right afterwards instead of just the training facility, but hey. But
you got that, you got that in Outbreak, but oh well.
There is one thing that I think should be pointed out here, in that you're talking about obviously preparing for a run and kind of judging the game upon like when you're prepared for it. I think there's pretty dangerous ground for the majority of people are going to judge a game pretty much on their first time playing it, because you know, not all that many are going to replay these games, you know, especially something like Resident Evil. You know, some do, and obviously we're kind of like in the circles that I'm sure we probably frequent more, where people that are going to play these games multiple times, but generally people aren't going to do that a whole lot. So
Well, especially for Zero's case, because it doesn't encourage you to replay it again.
yeah, there isn't
both
really
characters with you.
there isn't
versus,
yeah there's very little replay value to be brutally honest for the game. That's just kind of the way
Yeah.
it's set out.
Yeah.
So the first time is significantly more important, and obviously the first time you can't prepare for anything because you don't know what to expect. So I think that needs to be pointed out here.
That's why I stated that Resident Evil 1 on a first playthrough is a journey and it's something special. Resident Evil 0, not so much. It's going to be a slogfest. It's going to be messy. It's not going to be great. Then I was saying, like, as I was replaying it and I knew what I was expecting, retrospectively, Resident Evil 0 was a lot more enjoyable at that point for me. And I kind of, funny enough, I put it above Resident Evil 1 Remake in that situation, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
I can't agree with that one right there, Chief. No.
There's no way I can do
Let
It's
me
his
explain.
opinion.
Let me
I
explain.
respect it.
Explain. The reason why I liked it so much is because I felt it was mostly due to the set pieces of Resident Evil 0. I felt like Resident Evil 1 Remake, you kind of just go through basically 3 sections of the game. It's like whatever. At the end of it, you're like, at the first playthrough, it's like, oh yeah, it's cool. You're in the mansion, residence, and then lab, and they're all nitty gritty in their own respectable ways. Where Resident Evil 0, even though you're in the training facility mansion, like pseudo mansion, pseudo training facility, I kind of just liked it a lot of the set pieces, and it was just like this giant, almost like a giant world of its own that I really enjoyed. And then when you get to like the factory, I was like, this ain't really a lab, it's actually a factory. Kind of different from the actual Resident Evil formula where the last section is usually a lab area. I just really liked the factory. I just like the set piece it was. I love the waterfall gate bridge. The enemies you would fight along the way sometimes were terrible. I just really like the set piece. I don't know, I just felt I like more of a set piece environment that could bring me higher for a game that has like lesser quality gameplay for some reason. More of that type of player, especially for Resident Evil in some cases. Negatives I do quell is that there's that moments in the game where I was like, the AI sucks. I just couldn't handle it sometimes. The bat boss is a piece of shit.
Yeah, the bosses suck. I'm just gonna say that right now. The only 2 of them I actually liked was the Tyrant and at least Queen 1. I didn't like the bosses in this
And
game.
then the centipede is just a gimmick. It's just you just dodge, wait for it to get up, shoot, whatever. Will do admit though, I do like the idea of the bosses. It's just the execution is completely awful. Love the look of them. I love the centipede boss because of its look. I love the bat boss because it's all these bosses are like all of them except for the Tyrant are animalistic or insects. I thought it was really cool. I like that they introduced a lot more insect-like creatures, and I just felt like there was a lot more variety in the end. And without like dragging on, my negatives is like I said was that the AI was awful. Most of the boss battles are terrible. And I do like the Scorpion one as an introductory boss, even though it's very simplistic. Still liked it. And like you guys said, the plot is insane and like bombastically broken at points, which I will agree. I still enjoyed it for what it was, even though I do have my gripes with it. I like that Enrico shows up at one point and Rebecca makes the remark like I never saw him again that day, which is kind of sad. But overall, replaying both of those games, I just enjoyed 0 more. The fact that it was just a game that I never really played a lot, and I felt like I gave it too much respect that I should have not given it personally. That's just how I feel. That's how I generally came to my conclusion. I still think Resident Evil 1 Remake's a phenomenal game. Like, don't get me wrong. It's just that a personal taste to like situational. I just like Resident Evil 0 more. I think I feel like when I play it, I enjoy what I do, enjoy what I see more than Resident Evil 1. But that's how I go.
So I'm gonna keep it brief. I really do not like this game that much. I'm sorry. I've played it 3 times, and I think it just finally sunk in that they've done a lot of design choices that are very weird, finicky, and for the most part, they rely too much on you memorizing everything, and you will see that other games in the series have done this better in terms of balance. Like, I don't want to go all the way back to a facility to get a hook shot in order to progress the story. I don't want to deal with bosses that are absolutely terrible or can completely KO you or the AI and you have to watch after them. There is just some mechanics in this game that they wanted to make work, but it doesn't work so well. And I think one of the shining examples for this game and another game in the series that tried to do zapping better was Revelations 2. I can manage all my items in one separate inventory without having to worry about the other character being equipped, and I have to manage their ammo and I have to zap again. I just found that very tedious, to be honest, and it started to get on my nerves after a while.
Yeah, and Revelations 2, your second character, like Moya or the little girl Natalia, they can't die by normal means. So like they could take, like, say, all the punishment, right? And just have your main character like Barry, for example, or Claire come in and just kill them. Because they won't die from like the same way Claire and Barry would. They will die from enemies, but not your secondary character. Something that it's honestly much more preferable, because even like Revelations 1 and Resident Evil 6 done that, where I'm not worried about my partner. Just need to worry about myself, because since they are invincible, this is less stress I had to worry about, take care of them.
Yeah, I think that was the better choice going forward, because you don't have to deal with stuff like babysitting anymore after that. And I think, of course, 4 is also a worse example sometimes with Ashley, but at the same time, I will say I think 5, 6, all that other stuff, they had the right idea for managing how the co-op partner works.
Freaking 4. I know a particular song we all know love to stand Ashley though, but from a gameplay perspective, she's just obnoxious and horrible,
Yeah.
She is so fragile. She gets in the way pretty easily if there's an enemy teleport behind you and she just ducks down, right? So that allows her to get hit. Or God forbid you take out your shotgun and she's like right in front of you. The pellets will hit her if she's close enough or far enough, depending on your distance.
Yeah, I think this is one of those discussions that should happen on another podcast where it's like the skill really equate to the NPC just fucking dying and the mission failing because of your fault. And I think I'm on the side where it's like I don't think that counts for the players. Like, it's not my fault if I can't control the situation because the AI was stupid and ran into an enemy. That's completely asinine, but I feel as though Zero has some negatives that outshine the positives. There are positives like the environment, the atmosphere. I love it. The train, the two characters, the chemistry they have. I thought that was all well done, but it's a lot of design choices that hold the game back from greatness compared to Remake 1, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Are you done, or do you mind if I go?
Oh, I'm done. I said I was gonna be brief, so go ahead.
Okay. So the thing, I'm gonna start with the things I dislike about this game. Hook shot. I don't think I really need to reiterate that, but I think I think the biggest issue is that it's like I want to say it's like you have to rely on it for like 75% of the game.
No, not 75. At least a good 40%. Because once you go over to the Resident Evil 2 location, you're done. You don't need a hook for it. And that's like the game.
It's like 4 specific locations you needed in, but like when you get to that point, it's like the 70% mark of the game.
Here's the thing though, like, this is the problem with it. Like once you turn the thing around and go to the laboratory, the next area after you beat the bad boss, you needed to go up and go behind the church.
Yeah,
you know that on top of the fact, and considering that you can't go back to the door you came in, you got to go all the way around this long ass path just to get that goddamn hook shot, that one item. It's a long, like, if you didn't know, or well, obviously you won't know on your first playthrough. Yeah, it's a long path to get down there because you got to deal with elevators and all the other jazz.
Yeah, it's a thing that it's a later question, but I do definitely want to talk about the remake for Zero if they ever do one and why they should get rid of it. But we'll talk about that later. I was not a fan of the fact that Rebecca's health is like just utterly dog shit in that game. Like
Mhm.
Billy
It's
has like
non-existent. Like Billy has a normal health like bar.
Billy has 3
for,
times
like,
the amount of health as Rebecca. I've like
yeah, and
found this out.
it doesn't make sense. Like especially when you take into consideration that Rebecca had basically the same stats that Chris had in both the original RE1 and the remake, where she was able to avoid zombies a little bit easier and she could take a bit of a hit. So I just don't know why they decided she had to be extremely weak and could not take a hit at all. I had to
It
do.
was. Sorry, real quick.
I recently done a hard mode run, so I definitely get the sentiment of like the balancing just sucks in that game. Go on.
Well, that's it. Like that's kind of a problem Capcom had at their early stages, though. Like the male characters were slower, but they were tankier and whatnot. But the female characters were much faster, but they have like shit health. The good example of this is Resident Evil 4, because Ada is blitzingly fast on her feet compared to Leon, but she cannot take a hit to save her life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting way to make characters feel unique from one another, but like at the same time, that does not mean that the character has to be so weak to the point where it feels like none of your health items really matter at that point, because you're just gonna go back down to danger anyway, right?
It's too extreme.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's too extreme. Another thing I don't like is the fact that Billy cannot combine herbs. It's such a standard feature, and you just cannot do it. Like, why?
Yeah, like I
just
said,
don't
make them
understand
different
it.
though, but that's dumb altogether. Like just
Another. Oh,
I wanted to say that because in tying with what you were talking about with the health and with Billy not being able to make herbs, I think the idea, and I'm nowhere close to a developer, believe me. I think the idea is to want to be like encourage switching, because initially when you have a co-op partner and you can switch to them, the first thing you're thinking is, why the hell would I switch to another character if I can just use this character and use the other one as a pack mule? But if you tie a certain element into them, like with Rebecca being the only one able to mix and Billy being tankier, and I think he has like a higher crit rate or something like that. He has some other thing.
so
you can like kind of encourage the player. Now, whether that's successful or not is a completely different story. But
so I have
Ren
a
made a
counterpoint to that really quick, because I'm going to bring up what Ren said, and I know you're probably going to have a similar point to this. But like Billy, who is military, like he was former military and was trained by the military, can't mix herbs, but a guy Leon who is police trained and is a rookie can mix herbs. Like, how does that make sense? You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
exactly.
mean,
See, that's a
Billy's
good
never
point.
been. He's never been to Raccoon City. He doesn't know what a herb is.
Yeah,
Well, I
and-
mean,
and-
bullshit when that shit's in Africa.
And
I'm saying.
I have another point about this too, and how they could have made, going off of your point of like trying to incentivize using the character swapping, how they could have made that better. Have Rebecca have a similar ability to the doctor from the Outbreak games. I believe his name was George,
George.
right?
George.
Yeah,
George.
and give
The
her
love.
the ability to basically combine special healing items that Billy would not be able to make, because she is technically the Stars team medic. So
And also,
I feel
she's
like
a
that would make
set as well that you can only use for her, obviously, because it's our special item. So you're gonna have
Yeah.
to place her anyway.
So I think that would have made a lot more sense. I think in turn though, for like Billy, right, to kind of incentivize using him though, they could have had a thing where like maybe he has the ability to craft ammo, or specifically enhanced
A-
ammo that you
A
otherwise
Resident Evil
wouldn't have
3
been able to get.
mechanic.
Yeah, or
Again,
maybe
I'll talk a little
shot.
bit more about this when we get into a potential remake RE0. We'll get to that. But
Yeah.
that's another thing that I don't like about that game. Not a huge fan of the fact that eliminators have like basically just infinite hit stun. Other enemies like the frogs could just swallow you in one hit regardless of health amount.
Fuck them.
Leechmen are stupidly annoying. Like there's just a lot of things that this game feels like it needed more tweaking. Oh, and one other thing too before I move on to my positives, the lack of side packs. Granted, you might have noticed that I didn't talk about the item boxes, and I do think that's an issue, but I think they could have mitigated that issue had they included side packs for the characters to use to increase the amount of item slots they had. So that way
Slots would have broken so much of the annoyances. I will agree.
I feel like, you know, the fact that I have to worry about going through, because there's a lot of problem areas in RE0. A lot of areas where there's just very, very dangerous BOWs to deal with, and they're in very tight corners. And the fact that also too they kind of buffed zombies in Zero, in the sense that zombies can grab you from both the front and behind, and can grab you at the same time. The remakes for 2 and 3 kind of did this, but not to the extent that Zero did. So essentially, you could basically have double damage, and as Brandon mentioned too, zombies also have, some zombies have body armor as well. So
Yeah.
there's just some things where it's just like, why did you do it this way, or why didn't you balance the characters around these changes to make more sense, where it doesn't feel like these characters are completely useless or just completely at odds. I understand making a game challenging, but then that's a completely different thing from making a game completely unfair or just unreasonably balanced. So those are the things that I disliked, and that's why I think a side pack would have been nice. But the things that I did like, I really liked the environment. I liked Billy Cohen as a character, and I really wish they would bring him back. Revelation 0 maybe can that be a thing? That would be cool. I really actually like the amount of weapons that are in the game. I like that there's a unique variety of them, and some of them that we haven't really seen before in that particular configuration in the series before. I really thought that the areas that were more or less recreations of RE2 were really cool to see, and little nods to RE2 were really nice to see. Going back to guns really quick, I really thought that Billy's custom 1911 was probably one of the coolest things they'd ever done, where it's basically like a hybrid of an M9 and a 1911 with like a 15 round mag. It's beautiful. I love it. I wish it really existed.
Yeah, dude, the fire rate on that thing is amazing too. Just holding on X and it goes to work.
Do you know what's crazy too? They've never made an airsoft replica of that, but they've made airsoft replicas of like almost every iteration of the Samurai Edge, some of the magnums that Leon's used, the revolver from RE0 at the end of the game that you get as an unlock, stuff like that. But never Billy's custom 1911, and that's what I want the most. I want to see that happen. I would pay real money for that, Capcom.
Shadow here is the one who wants a natural Samurai Edge.
Because they tend to have a deal with Tokyo Marui, who makes their airsoft replicas. I would pay real fucking money for a Tokyo Marui fucking Billy's 1911 style Samurai Edge. Okay, that's all I'm asking for. Anyway, beside the point. I know I was just shitting on some of these enemies, but genuinely, I do think that they are good, well-made, designed enemies in terms of just visuals, right? Not balancing purposes. So I think, like, at least in that regard, like, they look cool, and I'd love to see them recreated in RE Engine, or I'd love to see them return in a new variation, because we have seen in the past where Capcom has revived certain enemy types and changed their aesthetics or changed their properties or enhanced them in a way when they've done like the Revelation series, or like even in RE5 they had the liquor betas, for example, right? So I'd like to see something come out of that in the future, maybe if they do like a Revelation 0.
Mhm.
Or a Revelations 3 for that matter. I really like the soundtrack to RE0 as well. It's very ambient. I feel like it's one of the better soundtracks in the series, to be
The
honest.
military facilities theme is very underrated.
Yeah.
The intro theme is great too.
Oh yeah.
It's fine. I mean, the hot take for me is I think Dead Aim's better, but that's
Dead Aim has a really good soundtrack too.
its intro is probably the best part of the game.
Oh, I gotta actually play through that game one of these days, and
I did on the stream like about 3 weeks ago as a base handgun run, and yeah, like the game itself, it's pretty off topic. The game itself is like all kinds of wacky, but the intro 45-second cutscene is like probably the highlight of the game.
Yeah,
unfortunately, it kind of goes down.
I get a mouse that's like compatible, so I could play that with a mouse. because
Not terrible with controller, but it's a bit
it's
weird.
bad. Like here's the thing: when you know you could play that game with the mouse and get like perfect headshots with it, like there's no way I'm gonna play it with a fucking controller.
Yeah,
Like,
this is not a particularly difficult game, but
but that being said, like I gotta beat that game so we could do potentially a future podcast on that game. But
Mhm.
anyway, I thought like I really liked the Proto Tyrant actually. I thought that was really cool. And I thought like Marcus as an antagonist was interesting as like kind of like the um more or less like the origin of how the or one of the facets of how the T virus or Tyrant virus was created in the series. So I really thought that was cool. Um and I also
And
liked the kind
years
of
ago.
precursors to like Wesker and Birkin before they kind of splintered off and did their own things with Resident Evil 1 and RE2 respectively. So I like those aspects. Also specifically with the HD remaster because this was not a feature this stuff was not featured in the original GameCube release or the Wii release. Wesker mode, that was a brilliant mode. I kind of
Yes.
wish that Remake 1 had a Barry Burton mode. I think that would have been cool, which is
Barry's mod.
like um
Yeah, it made that game more bearable with the Wesker.
yeah, and the extra costumes that they added in. Granted, they were DLC and that really sucked, but I really liked how specifically for Rebecca, I wish they would have done more costumes for Billy, but beside the point. They had a bunch of like reference costumes where it was like her various stars costumes that she's had in various RE games. So I thought that was really cool. And they even brought her N64 like inspired costume into that. And I thought that was like one of the coolest things. At the same time though, it makes me mad that, you know, RE0 had more content added in as far as costumes are concerned and also an additional mode that remake 1 didn't get that I feel as though it deserved. Again, that's a whole nother topic. One other thing too, just really quick with this, I think that like as far as visually speaking that remaster is concerned, Capcom did a much better job, if I can speak today, a much better job in remastering and recreating those areas in RE0 because a lot of the areas in Remake 1, the way that they remastered them, a lot of those background images are very stretched out and they just look very pixelated and low quality, which is why a lot of people end up modding the PC versions to have like these 4K retextured versions that are pulled straight from the GameCube assets. So, but that's a whole nother thing. But that being said, I really do like those aspects of RE0. And I do, for the most part, I do, despite having some grievances with RE0, I do enjoy it for what it is.
Respectable.
It is.
All
It's-
right. I think we should move on. We took a
well,
lot of time
well,
on this.
not everybody's finished. Hold on. Who hasn't gone yet? That want to go at least.
I think Queen didn't go.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess
fine.
with the things I liked about RE0 were, well, the story I know was all over the place. It was very different, I will say, than other RE games I played. The ones I played. It was very different compared to a lot of them, but I feel like it was more just they had fun with it when they made it. I feel like they just were like, "Hey, let's try a bunch of stuff out," and they tried it out. A lot of it didn't work, obviously, and they like the dual character switch, which we're about to go into. Like that, they started that there, and they've moved on. They moved on to it, and they've improved it in future games, such as the Revelations 2. They did a lot better job with it than they used to do. Yeah, that's all I really got to say. I don't really got much to say about it.
Yeah, we got a hurry up and move because we got
Yeah,
like
that's-
20, 30
You
minutes
want to
left.
read off number 9 then, Ren, since you're already talking?
Sure, no problem. Do you think that Capcom pulled off the dual character aspect between Billy and Rebecca fine in this game?
We kind of
they-
talked about that.
we talked about
already.
that. Yeah.
Is the problem.
Yeah, I guess quickly I could just say it's one of those things where it's like it's a cool concept, but it doesn't work too well in execution because you have times where the AI does not attack until you attack, and also you have situations where you want to get the character out of the way, but you have to use the other stick, and it's kind of a little bit convoluted. Like I said, I prefer when Revelations 2 did this, where you press the button, you quickly switched, and it wasn't really any problem between the two, and the other character wasn't that annoying to babysit in the process. That's it. Anyone else on this one, or we can move
I
on?
mean, like,
Alright, so my
the
thoughts on
AI
it
gets a
as
bit
well.
of stick.
I'll just say mine really quick. So I actually like being able to manually control the characters and switching between them. And I do feel as though, personally, in my opinion, I thought that the AI was much better than the AI in like RE5, for example, because Sheva can be really stupid in like higher difficulties. That said, I would be fine with just a regular like just character select and not having to deal with it. I'd rather not have to worry about another character, or at the very least, I feel like there should have been a co-op option.
I was about to say co-op.
I said
Oh shit!
I said earlier that they planned to have it in the original prototype for a co-op option, but it got scrapped unfortunately for the main game, but that would have been nice. So I guess we can move on, or is everyone done here?
I mean, yeah, I'd say it's like the AI gets a bit of stick, but like again, this game's like nearly 20 years old, and you have to start somewhere. So I think for what it was fine. It kind of it served its purpose, and I'm sure if they were to ever redo it, I mean, given how they would probably do it in some of a more modern engine, I'm sure it'd be far better executed.
I guess we can skip number 10 too, because we kind of already answered that, except
Yeah,
for
yeah,
saying
10.
Yeah.
Except-
we answered a lot of this.
TLDR, the bosses suck, the balancing sucks, they look cool, that's it, moving on.
the only thing we didn't mention was the bug things, and they're like whatever. They're
Yeah,
kind
they're
of
whatever, they're cannon fodder, honestly.
Yeah.
Bugs.
yeah,
Yeah,
just some bugs.
I can
monkeys, though.
read
still
off number
creepy.
11, and I'll read off number 11 and talk about that really quick.
All right.
What are your thoughts on the endgame unlockables that you receive? Costumes, weapons, leech hunter mode, etc. So funny thing about that is that the costumes in the HD port, they're automatically unlocked. You don't have to beat the game to unlock them anymore. And I think they did that because they felt as though people might have given up on the game too early with the remaster, or wouldn't have actually went out of their way to play it to completion. So I get that. Leech hunter mode, I didn't really care for it, to be honest. I didn't think it was that good.
Really not. I'm actually in the opposite there. I actually find it really fun. I do appreciate the REG factor, also don't like it at the same time. But because each path can be better than the other. But overall, I do enjoy freaking Leech Hunter. Not the best mode, honestly, but Wesker mode is king. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. I like the addition of Wesker mode more. It definitely changes up the playthrough. I don't know. I really didn't care for it. I would have liked to have seen like, I guess other types of modes that like maybe Remake introduced, or like RE2 introduced. Like, I just didn't like the idea of like, hey, do you want to go around collecting all these leeches that you cannot drop? Like, that's the biggest problem. Like, if you want to
in a game where inventory
pick 'em
is
up.
already tedious to deal with, and then it gets forced that your inventory is getting more and more limited. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not gonna
if you
But
wanna
here's
beat-
the thing, though. Like, you don't pick them up right away. Like, you
I know that. I know that. If you want to beat Leech Hunter, basically just go around, like leave Rebecca in the starting area and go around as Billy killing everything. Just pick up all the guns and just start killing away, and then have Rebecca pick up all the shit that she needs to pick from the cleared rooms.
There's just some sections that you need Rebecca to play as to grab the stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, the more effective way to play Leech Hunter is actually have both of them, just have both of them together, but leave Rebecca behind for a room or two, and then bring her along to collect whatever items that Billy cannot collect. That's like literally the most effective way to do it.
Really? Because I that's not how I beat it. So
It depends if how much time you're willing to put into it. If you want to try and beat it and do it fairly quickly, or if you give absolutely no care at all how long it takes you.
If you want to get all the trophies and get 100%, it takes like 2 hours.
Say it 2.5 because you gotta go through it one more time just to get the second one where you only have one side of the colors.
I do like the additional guns you unlock from Leech Hunter mode, like the basically assault rifle variation of the MP5 that doesn't exist, and also the revolver that's shown at the ending CGI cutscene. Those were cool.
Yeah, it's bad. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the additional content for me, it was kind of just there. None of it really floated my boat. I wasn't even the hugest fan of Wesker mode. It was cool. I can see why people would appreciate it. It's just not my thing. To be honest, like a lot of the costumes were probably like my favorite stuff because I actually thought some of them were pretty cool. But other than that, I didn't particularly really enjoy any of it. being honest, which is unusual for me.
Right.
Yeah, I think the highlight is the costumes for me. I have not, well, because I lost my save, I have to complete the game again on hard mode and get all my trophies that way, which is a pain in the ass. But I've seen gameplay. I'm gonna try it and see if I'm interested. If not, I'll say so later. Other than that, I saw the post-game weapons. I mean, that's standard for RE, infinite ammo, blasting away enemies, stuff like that. But the costumes are cool. I like that they reference the idea of not only director's cut for Rebecca, but also the prototype for the N64, because you see that like right in the
DLC.
chat. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I love all that stuff. She also has her headband, the red headband that was going to be given to her by Billy, I believe, at the end of the game in the original prototype.
Yep. That was supposed to be a memento from Billy. It was since removed, and now she has his dog tags.
Yep, dog tags, which is kind of weirder. It should have kept that, but it's whatever.
I mean, that is
do you?
also highly incriminating, but I guess we'll ignore that.
Oh, well, not only that though, you don't see that detail in Remake, do you? You don't see her with dog tags, right? So
I don't think so. Actually, I don't know.
No, but that's because it hadn't happened at that point. So
yeah, exactly my point.
That makes sense.
It's not like Remake 2 and Remake 3, which were developed at the exact same time, so they were able to interchange various bits and pieces. They didn't know they were going to do it, so you know.
Yeah.
Did anybody else want to go on 11 before we wrap things up with 12?
No, I think we're pretty much we're good.
Okay, I'll read off number 12 then too. If they remade RE0, what should they do differently? So I think mainly I would like to see them have a better connection to RE1. That's the main thing. But obviously other things would be like rebalancing things, cutting away the things that actually hurt the game more than help it, like the hook shot, for example. Just cut out all those segments because
Or make weapons not take 2 inventory slots.
Yes.
I think it was.
I'm not too worried about the inventory specifically because they've been replicating the RE7/RE2 remake inventory style lately. Although they could hypothetically replicate the RE Village inventory style. We don't know which way they're going to want to go with that. But chances are it'd probably be more similar to RE7 and RE2 remake.
I think you have to probably assume it's going to go down that path. I can't see it would being otherwise.
Yeah, so I'm not going to rule out the possibility of either or. I'm just saying that it's likely going to be the former.
It feels a lot better.
Also, too, I think that they just to make it a little bit more interesting. You know, obviously they're probably going to copy some of the tricks that they had with with Revelations 2 in particular, but maybe to make it a little bit more interesting, add in some co-op because
Would love that.
I could definitely see like an RE0 remake with potential both local and online co-op working very well, especially if you have to rely on each other for resources and you know, whether it be ammo or healing items or just clearing out a room or something like that. I could definitely see seeing it work out.
It could probably like almost a bit like a modern day RE5 effectively.
Like-
See, I would say that, but then I think to make it even more fitting for the survival horror like genre that it is, and also to kind of replicate what the original did, have the characters be forced to split up at times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that would
you
work.
could probably do that. Yeah, I mean, and that was one of the things of the game. You know, that there are times where you had to split up. I'm sure they would. I imagine that would be something that would be delved into. I mean,
Yeah, I
like-
just think that you should be able to do it at any time if
Yeah.
need be. You know what I mean? Granted, like if anything, you should be able to communicate with your partner. If you're online and you have no way to communicate with the mic, at least there should be some way to like contact the character to be like, hey, I'm like over at this spot. It's marked on the
Can
map.
radio
You can-
in with like
Yeah, stuff like
emotes.
that. Yeah. So
Billy
like,
help.
so I think stuff like that would be good. Side packs, which I brought up, and I'm glad Ren you reminded me of. Side packs, please put those in, because if you're not gonna have an item box, which I'm assuming might be changed in a RE0 remake, add in side packs, please. Please just add those in.
Yeah, that'll mitigate like a lot of problems that happens with the inventory. And
Yeah.
if you're gonna hold like stuff like the hunting rifle, that would be best, honestly.
With Marcus in particular, I just want more of his character to be expanded upon and explained, and maybe potentially if they could, because RE Village did kind of allude to some things. I'm not going to spoil
Yeah.
it for anybody who hasn't played Village yet, but they alluded to some things, so I'd like to see an RE0 remake maybe allude to things about
Mhm.
the village in Europe. And
Mm.
kinda talk
I'm
about
sure.
the
I
Oh,
imagine
yes,
they will.
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
they've already been
so-
effectively rewriting some of the stories, so
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure.
I would
that-
like to
Mhm.
see some connections like that. And one last thing, just I think that should be noted is that they should have more costumes for Billy and also for
Yes.
Rebecca as well, but Billy too, because
I mean,
Billy has like barely any costumes in
Yeah.
RE0. So,
like, I think my favorite costume is his gangster outfit.
I really like his Street Fighter costume, to be honest. The one for Cody. So anyway, somebody else could go.
Yeah,
I
I think
much-
I think a lot of the issues that have been highlighted are probably going to be largely alleviated by just running it in a more modern engine. You know, it talks of like being stun locked by enemies, or the AI, that sort of thing. I think just general advances in gaming in general, are just going to probably alleviate a lot of these issues if they redid it. Yeah,
I got something to add too, real quick. Sorry. Did you talk about character gimmicks done? Because one thing they could do for Billy is, like you said, have him like do like
Yeah, I didn't.
craft like ammo or make special ammo like an RE3. But another thing they could do is make him the better shot. Like he has a much better chance of getting critical damage than Rebecca, because like been in the Marines, right, for much longer than Rebecca's been a cop. Cause she's 18, she just started. So like that should factor in. Like he should have better gunplay than Rebecca, but not to a point where Rebecca's unplayable with guns.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be like, well, Rebecca being a medic and also a police officer, she should be better as a medic, and also, well, she's also a chemist too. So
Yeah.
like, so aspects for her character should also stand out and be better. So like maybe she can make more potent healing items. Me in particular, I do tend to like to play as like a medic type of character. And completely unrelated game, but like sometimes like me and Brandon will play COD Zombies, and I love being a fucking medic in Call of Duty Zombies. So like I'll pick up anybody. I don't give a fuck. So like so in that kind of
Revive.
situation, if it's like RE0, right? Like if I had the opportunity to play as a medic and like be a fucking bomb ass medic, I will do it. Okay, let's go. Okay, anyway,
Cindy or George. I guess I'll go. What they could do differently with RE0 that hasn't been said here. I was honestly thinking of a concept of mine that I had. I was like, what if they did Resident Evil 0 co-op, like you guys said, but sort of in the style, like kind of a slower pacing, like Resident Evil 2 Remake kind of did for most people's playthroughs. Like I'm thinking it to myself, like you go through a room, and then you hear your partner get attacked by a zombie. You go back to the room, you see them getting a chunk of their throat almost being torn out, type of deal. And like to me, I felt like something similar to that, like a different tone switch for Resident Evil would be for for Resident Evil 0 would definitely work in the better for a more like a dark, like tone wise darker, a little bit more of a little bit slower burn, because Resident Evil 0 looking back on it, it's a bit of a faster, like pacing wise and plot wise game. You kind of get to point A to point B. It's just the backtracking with the inventory system is what makes it slow. Otherwise, if it didn't have that, it would be a pretty quick game. So that's my take on that.
I agree with everyone here, and just completely exterminate the hookshot from all life, existence, everything.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
people don't particularly.
It
I think
seems like I missed one important point. I didn't mean to cut you off, Black, but original enemy types for an RE0 remake, because all of the remakes have done an original enemy type.
You know what's cool? In that very like document that we're looking over the questions and everything, and they talk about cut enemies, there were a lot of them that didn't make it to the original RE0. Like supposedly Wesker was going to have a monkey that would go around and follow you, and that turned into the Eliminator. So I'm wondering, like, that would have been the pursuing enemy for the game, even though they said it didn't make sense, and I agree, it's kind of weird, but they could have did things like that. Also, man spiders were going to be in the game as well, and you would see them somewhere in the facility. And I'm like, yeah, if they do like remakes, the best idea is to go back and use these cut enemies for the better and see what happens with them.
A lot of the concept for those cut enemies are actually really dope. Like like you said, the human spiders, whatever they are.
There was also
And
another one where it's like a frog-like enemy that would be stuck on the ceiling, and they said the reason they didn't do this was because it was limitations at the time, but it was some amphibious creature that would like be in a cocoon, burst out, and come out of the ceiling at you. And I'm like, they could do something like that where the idea didn't work back then, but now it would be okay because enhanced tech.
Hmm.
So that's all I got for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested. As I was saying, was like, I think the hook shot is not liked because people don't particularly like backtracking, and the hook shots of not only is it like people don't particularly like optional backtracking sometimes, and when it's forced upon you, like people just revile it, which is why the hook shot's just so like hated. I'm 100% they would probably not implement. I don't think they'd have anything like that at all. They're just like general progression. I think something like Resident Evil 2 Remake is probably a decent base for an RE0 remake. I think that's probably about the right sort of pacing. I think it's a decent start point. Just find a way to kind of integrate something like that into like a 2-player cooperative style, and I think you're most of the way there.
Anything else, guys?
No, I'm done for now. Just
I think we're all
cut
good.
enemies.
Yeah, we're
bring
all
them back.
good.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead and do outros. Renegade, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at RentOperative_. You can find me on YouTube at Renegade Operative. The only thing I'm working on right now is a review for the Fear Street trilogy, a horror movie anthology that came out on Netflix. And I really enjoy them so far, so look forward to that review sometime later in the week.
I was curious about those actually.
The first
Yeah,
one
well-
is actually decent, so I really did enjoy it, so I would say it's worth watching.
Alrighty, so I might check that out sooner or later after Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, because I still haven't watched that yet. Anyway, next person up, Austin, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter with the same handle as AK Austin. I also do mostly every week I do Twitch streams under the same username AK Austin _01. You can find me there. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Alrighty, Divik, where can we find you?
Hey, I just shitpost on Discord, so.
Alrighty. Queen Chicken, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at QueenChicken7, or you can find me on Twitch at Warden Shepherd and 7. I'm currently playing through the Devil May Cry series, so if you want to check that out, feel
Nice.
free.
Hey, that's what's up.
It's my first playthrough, so
Yeah.
Nice.
I gotta do 4 shortly. Went through 1, 2, and 3. All were very different experiences.
yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
I
one
like
way to put it.
2, I don't like talking about. That was what the.
Me
To be fair,
neither.
it was a fun stream of
was
just like
fun.
going through it and blasting through and just like ridiculing
I-
everything I saw.
I beat it in one sitting, so I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Brandel, where can we find you?
Not your damn business. I'm just kidding. You can find me on Twitter at Immortal Brendel. That's it. Nothing else.
Alrighty. Black Shadow, where can we find you? I was gonna call you Black Rock.
Again. Again.
Too.
Oh boy.
I need to find it. Never mind. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, Black Shadow 993. Also on Twitch as well at Black_Shadow_993 because someone beat me to the punch. And yeah, like in about a month or so, be doing the returns for Resident Evil Outbreak with my so-called Ruffle Raffle, as well as doing a cooperative base handgun run only for Resident Evil 5 Professional, which is going to suck, which should be good.
Ooh, that's
Get
gonna be
ready for the
interesting.
meme shadow.
Did 4 back in April, which was brutal. And someone decided they wanted to join me for the pain that's going to be RE5, and I'm like, okay.
Are you capping yourself with specific handguns?
It's starting
The base handgun unupgraded.
upgrades.
That's it.
Oh Jesus, that sounds
Yes, that's-
terrible. Oh my God.
I did it for 4. It was an experience. And now someone gets to join with me. So yeah, I have that fun in about 6 weeks.
I volunteered, but then I was thinking like, oh shit, there's some spots
A
that
lot
I am
of
gonna be scared
volunteers.
of.
They're all idiots.
How to turn RE5 into an absolute horror game? Just play with handguns.
Wesker
Anyway.
is going to be just ruffle territory.
Anyway, you guys know me as biodevil_dom. You can find me under that name on Twitter, YouTube, on extremely rare occasions, Twitch. I have an RE7 video that's already fully scripted. I just need to take the time to record it whenever I get free time, but work is keeping me preoccupied. And I'm also actually getting back on track with recording footage for RE3, the original. I recently got a Dreamcast and an RGB SCART cable, so I will be getting some Dreamcast footage as well. So that should
Nice.
be interesting. But that being all said, this has been another IAS podcast episodic discussion. We'll be seeing you all for the next one. So later.
EDFNs.
All right.
Hookshot sucks.
Yes,